My resolve hasn't wavered one bit since the moment I heard his words. I stepped forward, carrying my suitcase, and felt that deep despair. Goodbye, Louis. She walks away with a sad, gentle smile, holding her suitcase closed as beautiful blue roses surround her. In the quiet of the night, an intimate and passionate moment unfolds behind the bedroom windows. He leans over her in the quiet bedroom, their heavy breathing filling the silent air. His hand rests firmly beside her on the bedsheet, capturing her in their silent world. Afterwards, the dark-haired man runs a hand through his hair with a cold, distant expression. She sits in bed with a weary, downcast expression while he gets dressed without looking back. I'll see you again in 2 months. He walks out of the bedroom, his footsteps echoing in the cold silence as the door shuts behind him. All right, she whispers to herself, left completely alone in the silent room. Excuse me, Millie, what's wrong? I thought you looked tired, so I came to help you with your bath. You're right, I'll need your help for that. Lady Sophia, Millie says, looking at her mistress with deep concern. Millie tearfully grabs Lady Sophia's hands in a dramatic chibi display of absolute worry and loyalty. Lady Sophia is left completely stunned and blank-faced by her maid's sudden emotional outburst. Thank you, Millie. Sophia closes her eyes and relaxes in the warm bath while Millie gently brushes her silver hair. It's almost been a year since I married him. We had a political marriage 1 year ago. I am the eldest daughter of a count who runs the royal tailor shop, and he is the eldest son of a duke's family that has produced many royal knight commanders. Our marriage was ordered by the king to strengthen our loyalty to the crown. They kneel before the altar during their grand wedding ceremony, bound together by duty rather than love. Even though we live together, our conversations are kept to a minimum. We've never gone out together, and he hasn't even smiled at me once. The only thing we have is our time together once every 2 months to produce an heir. I wonder if our relationship would change if we had a child. How sad. He didn't come with me again today. Look, she's all alone again. Isn't she always by herself? I heard she's not in a good relationship with her husband. I'm not feeling very well somehow. I feel bad for the host, but I think it's about time I headed home. Oh? Duchess Chamberlain, have you come alone again today? Because I believe our invitation stated specifically for you to attend as a couple. It seems he doesn't even want to be seen at a party with such an inadequate wife. My deepest apologies. My husband is busy with work. I will make sure he accompanies me next time. Ugh. Overwhelmed by the public humiliation and a sudden wave of nausea, Sophia turns and runs away from the party. Oh my, running away after just that much? She's so fragile. Standing over the sink with running water, Sophia struggles with a sudden, painful bout of sickness. Maybe I have food poisoning? I am not a medical professional. This is not medical advice or diagnosis. You should see a healthcare professional or seek care. My body feels so heavy. Maybe it's from exhaustion. I need to get home soon. But wait, come to think of it, when was the last time I had my period? Congratulations on your pregnancy, Lady Sophia. My lady, congratulations. Thank you, Millie. Don't tell anyone yet, okay? I want to be the one to tell him myself. All right. Finally, I've done it. I'm sure he'll be happy once he hears we're having a child. Now we can finally start building a warm home together. I think he should be practicing his swordsmanship right around here. I'm hiding out of habit. I wonder if I'll be able to look him in the eye today. Lou, I don't want a child. Sophia freezes behind the tree in absolute shock, her world shattering as she overhears her husband's cold words. What? Why not? Just feel like it? But then there's no need for you two to keep trying to have one, though. It's my parents' order, so I have no choice. So that's how it is. Lady Sophia! Lady Sophia! Millie runs through the pouring rain towards her mistress in distress, calling out, Lady Sophia, what's the matter? Millie rushes to hold an umbrella over Sophia. Worried, she says, You'll make yourself sick, my lady? Sophia can only look down in despair and whisper, He doesn't want it. To which Millie responds in surprise, Huh? Under the shelter of the umbrella, tears stream down Sophia's face as she weeps. Louis, he said he doesn't want a child. Millie comforts her as she breaks down, crying, Hip! Sophia's heart shatters completely, her silent screams of grief echoing like cracking glass. Ooh-ah! Back inside, Sophia stares blankly out the window into the stormy night. When Millie calls out, Lady Sophia, she turns with a resolved expression and says, Millie, I've made up my mind. Clasping her hands over her stomach, Sophia declares with absolute determination, I'm leaving this house with my child. Standing firm, her resolution does not waver as she repeats her vow. I will leave this house together with this child. Hearing this, Millie is stunned, her heart aching for her mistress as she realizes, I had no idea she was so worried about that. Sophia looks out the window, watching the rain pour down as she thinks to herself, I just couldn't take it anymore. Sophia remembers how she tried to reach out to Louis, only for him to turn his back on her coldly. She thinks, I thought things would be better once I had a child. The memories of her cold, distant marriage shatter like glass. She laments, and I endured it all, but it was all meaningless. Looking down at her unborn baby, Sophia's gaze turns protective and fierce. I don't know what will happen if he finds out about this child's existence. That's why to protect his child and to make this child happy, I have decided to leave this house. Millie gulps, deeply moved by Sophia's strength and resolve as she makes a silent promise to stand by her. Stepping forward with absolute loyalty, Millie declares, "Be your ally, Lady Sophia. I will follow you no matter what happens." Sophia's weary face softens into a warm, grateful smile at her maid's unwavering devotion. Over the next 5 months, plans are meticulously written down in a journal, marking the passage of time. Sitting at her desk, Sophia coordinates their escape with Millie, saying, "I've made preparations before my belly gets too big. I'll be leaving the house in 5 months. Millie smiles, adding, "I'm glad we were able to keep the doctor quiet about it." In a brief flashback, Sophia is seen pleading with the nervous doctor, saying, "I want to surprise him, so please don't tell anyone until morning." Knowing the stakes, Sophia places a hand over her womb, thinking, yes, we absolutely have to make sure no one finds out. If my pregnancy is discovered, it's all right. I'll definitely protect you, my baby. Millie ponders their strategy, noting, our timing of leaving the house is very important. Sophia looks downward, agreeing quietly, that's right. Sophia holds her quill, writing down details of their plan. She reasons, there will be fewer people around while Louis is away on his expedition. Looking from the outside of the window, Sophia and Millie discuss their plans in the quiet of the room as they agree, yes. Tapping her quill against the desk, Sophia contemplates their next steps. There are many uncertainties. We'll reconsider the route later. But the biggest challenge is, Sophia's expression darkens as she recalls her cold family, her stepmother and stepsister laughing wickedly behind her. She thinks, having to figure out how I can live on after leaving this house, my own family isn't. Sophia looks down in sadness, acknowledging the harsh truth that her maternal home is not somewhere I can go back. Looking at Millie, Sophia sighs, I wish I could abandon my status and live peacefully somewhere. Millie watches her with concern, thinking, but I suppose it won't be that easy. She intends to live as a commoner. Looking out at the rain through the grand window, Millie worries for her mistress's future, knowing that her life might get even tougher from now. Sophia smiles brightly, imagining a future where she can finally be free and happy with her child. Back in the room, Millie looks up in sudden realization as a memory comes to her, while Sophia asks in confusion, huh? Millie turns to her with an eager, helpful expression, and Sophia softly calls her name. Millie? Millie's eyes sparkle with absolute determination as she stares intently at Sophia, ready to reveal a secret. Sophia thinks back to their shared past, remembering how Millie has always been by her side, from way back then. In a painful memory, Sophia's cruel stepfamily throws a bucket of cold water over her, but Millie courageously shields Sophia with her own body to protect her. Grateful for Millie's lifelong loyalty, Sophia holds her hands warmly as they smile at each other, ready to face the future together. Sophia looks at her ledger with a serious expression, noting, finally, we obviously need money. In a cute chibi moment, Sophia ponders, besides, I don't really have many things worth selling. Millie clasps her hands and encourages her, saying, moreover, you're known as a sensible person, Lady Sophia. Sophia looks thoughtful, explaining her reasoning. Besides, in order to raise this child, I need a steady income. Millie nods determinedly, completely agreeing with Sophia's realistic outlook on their future as commoners. Both of them shrink into adorable chibi figures as they furrow their brows, trying to brainstorm ideas on how to earn a living. Suddenly, a polite knock on the door interrupts their thoughts, and a voice asks, Madam, do you have a minute? Sophia quickly replies, please wait just a little bit. Turning to Millie, Sophia keeps her composure and says reassuringly, we still have 5 months. Let's think about it calmly later. Sophia opens the door to greet the maid outside, asking, what is it? The maid replies nervously, actually, as the scene shifts to the drawing room where an unwelcome guest sits in the dark, waiting for her. Entering the room, Sophia bows her head respectfully and says, it's been a while, my lord. Louis's brother, Lord Darius, sits back on the sofa with a smug, arrogant grin. Sophia thinks to herself, I can't believe Lord Darius suddenly came here. Why did he come here when he and his brother don't even get along very well? Smirking mockingly at her, Darius says, I came because father said he had something you needed. Aren't you happy to see your husband's family? Sophia asks, surprised, father-in-law and mother-in-law are coming here too? Darius replies dismissively, yes, they should be arriving soon. Darius glares at her with a cold, condescending look, thinking, By the way, you're still as uninteresting as ever. Sophia can only look down, gripping her dress in quiet discomfort. Waving his hand dismissively with a smug sneer, Darius insults her, saying, "Despite having no redeeming qualities whatsoever, you get to become a member of our Chamberlain family." Darius smirks arrogantly and says, "Women have it so easy, don't they?" Struggling to keep her composure, Sophia manages a tense smile and responds, "I'm very grateful for it all," while Lord Darius watches her coldly, clearly unconvinced by her polite facade. Darius narrows his eyes at Sophia and asks pointedly, "You two are properly performing your marital duties, right?" Surprised and deeply uncomfortable, Sophia can only whisper in confusion, "Huh?" Showing off a smug, mocking smile, Lord Darius continues, "Father and mother are waiting for a grandchild too. That's why I asked." Darius leans in and presses further with an incredibly intrusive question. "Is he even embracing you regularly?" Sophia blushes in deep embarrassment and discomfort, stammering, "That's..." Standing up from his seat, Lord Darius towers over Sophia and says mockingly, "I don't think you'll be satisfied with that rigid guy." Darius closes the distance between them, leaning down with an unwelcome, intimidating gaze as Sophia shrinks back against the sofa. Overwhelmed, Sophia tries to push him away, pleading desperately, "Please stop this," but he ignores her cries and pins her down against the sofa. Looking down at her with a cruel smirk, Lord Darius whispers maliciously, "My brother was your first time, right?" Leaning in closer to her tear-streaked face, Lord Darius sneers, "I will show you that I am better than him," leaving Sophia gasping in absolute horror. Trapped beneath his weight, Sophia desperately tries to scream, but her voice fails her in her panic, leaving her thinking in despair, "My voice won't come out." Darius smiles mockingly at Sophia's tears and whispers, "Don't give me that look. I know you're actually enjoying this, right?" Suddenly, the door clicks open and a stern voice cuts through the tense air, calling out, "Darius!" Louis's parents stand at the doorway, their imposing presence instantly halting Darius's actions. The father looks at his son and remarks coldly, "You're here? First?" Rubbing his temples with a deep sigh of irritation, the Duke demands of his son, "What do you think you're doing?" Darius casually backs away, raising his hands as he makes a flimsy excuse. "Well, my sister-in-law looked a bit tired, so I was just helping her rest." Sophia trembles violently in fear and shame, while the Duke looks at her with utter disappointment, muttering, "You can't even protect yourself." The Duchess looks on with deep disgust and scoffs, "To think the daughter-in-law of the Chamberlain family is this pathetic. I truly pity Louis." Hanging her head in deep humiliation, Sophia can only whisper, "I deeply apologize." Turning his stern gaze toward his other son, the Duke warns, "Darius, don't do anything unnecessary either." Darius looks away with a disgruntled expression and mutters, "Fine." A knock on the door interrupts the heavy silence as a familiar voice announces, "It's Louis, I've just returned." Louis steps into the room clad in his grand military uniform. The Duchess welcomes him warmly, saying, "Welcome home." Sensing the incredibly heavy and tense atmosphere in the room, Louis immediately asks, "Did something happen?" It seems Darius was looking after Sophia, who was tired. Darius raises a hand and quickly agrees, saying, "That's right, brother." Louis stares back neutrally and responds, "Is that so?" while the Duke sighs coldly, adding, "I'm amazed she can't even manage her own health." Turning his attention toward his wife, Louis calls out her name coldly, "Sophia." Louis glares down at her and says sternly, "You need to be more mindful of your position." Sophia looks down in bitter despair, knowing her husband will never take her side, thinking to herself, "He won't listen to a single word I have to say, will he?" "You hear me?" Louis demands coldly. Standing up and bowing deeply before her husband's family, Sophia submissively replies, "Yes, I am deeply sorry." Turning to her harasser, Sophia swallows her pride and says, "And to you as well, Lord Darius. I apologize for causing you such concern." Darius smirks with insincere kindness, replying, "Sure, we're family after all. It's only natural." Louis takes his seat opposite his parents and gets straight to the point, asking, "So, what brings you here so suddenly today?" The Duke replies calmly, "I just wanted to see how you two were doing." Remaining seated, Louis politely acknowledges his parents' words, saying, "Thank you for your concern." The Duke narrows his eyes and presses on, "Besides, I've yet to receive a single report from you." Louis looks up in confusion, asking, "A report?" The Duke crosses his arms and demands coldly, "About the child. When exactly is your wife going to fulfill her duty? Isn't producing an heir her primary role as a daughter-in-law of the Chamberlain family?" The Duchess chimes in, expressing her false worry. We're worried, you know. If you two don't have a child because of you, Sophia, Louis will have to suffer, get it? I wonder if you're even aware of that. Sophia grips her dress tightly, whispering, I'm sorry to have caused you such a worry. Dismissing her apology, the Duke commands sternly, I don't need an apology from you. I'm telling you to have an heir quickly. Do you understand? Clenching his gloved fist in frustration at his father's overbearing demands, Louis responds quietly, Yes, father. Sophia sits in miserable silence, thinking, but Louis, he doesn't want... Suddenly, a sharp wave of nausea hits her, and she gasps out, The sudden interruption draws the cold, piercing gazes of her in-laws, who stare at her with suspicion and distaste, leaving Sophia frozen in fear. Desperate to escape before they notice anything, Sophia bows quickly and says, My apologies, I'm not feeling well, so I will take my leave. As Sophia hurries out of the room clutching her stomach, the Duchess sighs dramatically and remarks, She's so frail. No wonder she hasn't managed to conceive. Sophia hurries down the hallway, her long skirts rustling as she desperately flees from the oppressive atmosphere of the drawing room. Back in the safety of her chambers, Millie rushes to her side in concern and asks, My lady, are you all right? Sophia tries to reassure her with a weary smile, replying, Yeah. Sophia stares blankly ahead, her heart heavy with bitter sadness as she thinks, I was treated so horribly, and yet I couldn't say a word. Suddenly, another knock sounds at her door, and Louis's voice calls out, Sophia, may I have a moment? I have something important to discuss with you. Sophia gasps in surprise. Louis? Her heart begins to race with anxiety as she thinks, an important discussion? Is he angry because I left the room earlier? She hesitates for a second before reaching for the door. With trembling hands, Sophia opens the door to find her husband standing before her, a terrifying thought flashing through her mind. Did he find out I'm pregnant? Trying to hide her anxiety, Sophia asks softly, What is it about? Louis holds up an official envelope and replies, It's about the ball hosted by His Majesty the King. Handing the letter forward, Louis explains, We are expected to attend as a couple there. Make sure you check the details. Reaching out with a trembling hand, Sophia quietly takes the envelope and replies, All right. Holding the invitation close to her chest, Sophia says, I understand, as Louis turns and walks away without another word. The heavy double doors slam shut, leaving Sophia completely alone in her quiet room to process her thoughts. Letting out a breath she didn't realize she was holding, Sophia thinks with relief, I'm glad he hasn't found out. But her expression quickly saddens as she notes, but he wasn't angry, and he didn't even look worried. Staring down at the invitation, Sophia is left alone with the painful realization of how cold and indifferent her husband truly is toward her. Millie stands in the room, looking at Sophia with a quiet, observant gaze, as if sensing her lady's heavy heart after the stressful encounter with her in-laws. Hearing quick footsteps outside, Sophia looks up as Millie calls out urgently, Lady Sophia! Millie looks at Sophia with a bright, determined expression, asking, Would you like to head into the city tomorrow? Strolling down the beautiful, sunlit streets of the capital with Millie, Sophia smiles warmly and remarks, It's been a while since I've been out in the city. Watching a pair of young girls laughing and holding hands as they walk by, Sophia feels a gentle pang of longing for a simpler, happier life. Clasping her hands together with a soft smile, Sophia says, We'll come here together often, won't we? Millie and Sophia arrive on a balcony outside the entrance of a shop, ready to step inside. Entering the warm, beautifully lit room, Sophia is amazed by the rows of colorful threads and sewing supplies on the shelves, thinking to herself, As I thought, the collection here is the best. Sophia smiles gently as she holds several spools of light blue thread close, thinking, Sewing always helps me clear my mind. Suddenly, a spool of thread slips from her hand with a soft sound and rolls away on the floor. Gasping in surprise, Sophia says, as a hand reaches down to pick up the dropped spool and offers it back, saying, Here you go. Turning around with a polite smile, Sophia accepts it and replies, Thank you very much. The young man looks down in mild surprise, but as his eyes meet hers, his expression softens in recognition as he murmurs, Oh, Sophia? Sophia looks up in astonishment, her eyes wide as she stares at the handsome blonde gentleman standing before her. The blonde man, dressed in an elegant blue coat with green jewels, holds the thread and looks back at her with a gentle, mesmerizing gaze. Still in disbelief, Sophia trembles slightly and whispers, You are... Her heart skips a beat as she realizes his identity and gasps, Elliot? A warm, radiant smile spreads across Elliot's face as he says, I knew it was you, Sophia. It's been a while. Sophia's face lights up with genuine happiness for the first time in a long while as she exclaims, Yes, you're back, aren't you, Elliot? Outside, Millie sits comfortably at a charming outdoor bakery and cafe, sipping tea while letting her lady catch up with her old friend in peace. Seated across from Elliot at a sunlit table, Sophia smiles brightly and says, "I never expected to run into you here. I'm so surprised." Elliot smiles back gently and responds, "That's why I'm so amazed we happen to run into each other like this." Taking a slow sip of her warm tea, Sophia looks down with a peaceful smile, thinking to herself, it all feels so nostalgic somehow. Elliot smiles warmly and says, "I see, so you're still going to that tailor shop." Sophia chuckles softly, replying, "It's our family's regular spot after all." Elliot looks back on the past with a fond expression and says, "When we were kids, that time we got into an argument because you lost at chess." In a flashback to their childhood, a young Sophia slams her hands on the table and yells angrily at Elliot, "You cheated!" Surprised and defensive, young Elliot looks up at her with wide eyes and stammers, "No, I didn't." Elliot's voice continues in the present, reminiscing, "It was actually rare to see you get so worked up. You told me—" In the flashback, young Sophia continues to shout, letting out all her frustration with a flushed face. Elliot recalls, "When I heard that, I was pretty down since that was our first real fight. But then, a few days after their argument, a young Sophia had approached him holding a soft teddy bear, apologizing with tears in her eyes. 'I'm sorry for saying I hated you the other day. I'm really sorry.'" Standing in the grand parlor, young Sophia shyly extends the teddy bear to childhood Elliot, who stares at the gift in surprise. Back in the present, Elliot smiles warmly at the memory and says, "Then you gave me a cute teddy bear. I heard that you worked so hard to make it." Elliot's eyes crinkle with warmth as he adds, "I remember being so happy after hearing that." Blushing slightly at the recollection of her childhood antics, Sophia admits with a gentle smile, "Oh, I remember that." Holding her teacup, Sophia looks down with a soft, reminiscent smile and confesses, "That time, making a teddy bear was still a bit too hard for me." In a flashback, young Sophia struggles to stitch the toy until her elegant mother gently steps in. Sophia's narration reads, "My mother couldn't stand watching me struggle, so she helped." Sophia recalls her mother's expert hands sewing the teddy bear, and she remembers how proud she was of the final result. "It was my absolute masterpiece." Elliot smiles and chuckles, "Well, your mother's sewing skills were always famous, right?" Sophia looks down with a gentle, proud smile, replying, "She's a mother I'm very proud of," while Elliot gazes at her with deep affection and tenderness. Taking a moment, Elliot shifts the topic and says, "Oh, right, while I was studying abroad." The two old friends sit in the warm sunshine of the cafe, enjoying each other's company as the petals drift around them. Elliot's expression turns serious and gentle as he says, "I heard about your marriage while I was abroad, and I've been worried about you." Sophia looks up in quiet surprise, murmuring, "So you knew about it?" Forcing a sad, gentle smile to hide her pain, Sophia softly lies, "Yeah, I am happy." Noticing her subtle sadness, Elliot looks down at his gloved hands and says softly, "You've always been so strong. You endured everything at home after your mother passed away." Elliot speaks with deep empathy, his heart aching for the struggles she has always quietly faced. Sophia looks at him, deeply touched by his sincere understanding and compassion, which she hasn't felt in so long. Feeling a warm sense of comfort from his kind words, Sophia says softly, "All right, thank you for that." Elliot smiles back at her with immense warmth and reassurance, his green eyes filled with a promise to be there for her. Elliot leans forward and speaks with determination, saying, "My business is doing well too. There is quite a lot I can do for you now." Elliot smiles warmly at Sophia and says, "Please remember that you have someone like me in your corner," leaving Sophia looking deeply touched. A dark carriage rattles loudly down the cobbled streets as Sophia and Millie make their way home. Inside the carriage, Millie smiles brightly and says, "It was wonderful to see Lord Elliot again, wasn't it?" Sophia looks down with a gentle smile and replies, "It was." Staring out the window as the Capitol passes by, Sophia thinks softly, "That was a wonderful coincidence." In a flashback, Elliot waves goodbye from the street corner, calling out, "I'll come running the moment you need me. You can always count on me, okay?" As Sophia and Millie wave back. Sophia warmly recalls Elliot's childhood and present warmth, thinking about his persistent tendency to worry about her. Smiling as she watches the scenery, Sophia thinks, and his kindness. He's still that dependable, brother-like figure he's always been. Sophia places a hand gently over her stomach, her smile fading as she realizes, though I couldn't bring myself to tell him about my family situation or the child. A quiet sadness falls over the carriage as Sophia looks out the window, keeping her secrets close to her heart. Brushing away her doubts, Sophia looks down at her stomach with a hopeful expression and thinks, that really is encouraging. In his dimly lit study, Louis sits quietly at his desk working on papers when a sudden knock sounds and a guard calls out, "Excuse me." The guard enters the study, stands before the desk, and reports, "The lady has just returned." As Louis continues to write with his quill, the guard adds, "She didn't notice that she was being followed." Louis responds flatly, "I see." The guard stammers nervously, which causes Louis to look up with a cold expression and ask, "What is it? You got something to report?" The guard sweat drops and reports, "Yes, the lady was spending time with another man. It appeared they met coincidentally, but they seemed to be on very familiar terms." Upon hearing the news, a dark, freezing aura surrounds Louis, his sharp blue eyes narrowing with cold jealousy. Terrified by Louis's intense, frightening expression, the guard flinches and bows deeply, stammering out, "That concludes my report." Sweating in fear, the guard quickly calls out, "Please excuse me," before fleeing the room. Suddenly, the heavy doors click open again, catching a brooding Louis by surprise as a voice remarks, "What?" An elegant, wavy-haired blonde knight steps into the room with a bright, charming smile. Louis grumbles, "I didn't do anything." His blonde friend smiles back amusedly and remarks, "Even though you think you didn't do anything, your face is still scary, Louis." The blonde friend wags his finger and says, "At least be aware that they're afraid of you," recalling how the guards flinch. As Louis responds with a sharp glare, the chibi friend sighs, "That's exactly the face that I'm talking about." Looking closely at Louis, the friend asks, "Are you perhaps mad about the thing with your wife?" Louis looks back coldly and asks, "What do you mean?" The friend smiles and gossips. It seems she was alone with a man in the town. Louis looks away with feigned indifference, replying, "I don't think I need to be worried about that, though." "Come on, don't be pretentious," the friend teases, leaning onto the desk. But Louis looks down grimly and says, "We are a couple in name only. I don't have the right to go against that." His friend's expression softens in concern as he murmurs, "Louis." Looking at Louis's back, the friend warns him in a serious tone, "If you keep up that attitude, she'll leave you someday." Louis shoots back, "That's ridiculous. Instead of worrying about that, you should focus on your work." The friend walks out with a casual wave, muttering, Yeah. Back in her beautiful, bright dressing room, Sophia sits quietly next to her mannequin and sewing table, looking at her jewelry box. Sifting through her light blue thread, Sophia smiles happily and thinks, "It was so nice to be able to go to the tailor shop again after so long, and to see Elliot. I had a wonderful time." With a soft click, Sophia closes her sewing box as her face turns serious, thinking, "But right now, rather than sewing." Looking down with a heavy heart, Sophia thinks, "I need to think about the party. Going alone would be difficult, but even going with Louis is..." Looking down at her lap with a sad, lonely expression, Sophia thinks, "I don't even have any friends." Sophia gasps slightly and looks up in surprise as she hears someone approaching her room. Millie pushes the doors open with a bright, happy smile, presenting a rack of gorgeous gowns as she calls out, "The dresses you ordered are here." A sweet smile returns to Sophia's face as she looks at the gowns and says, "Thank you. Which one should I wear to the party?" Sophia tries on a stunning pale purple gown with elegant lace and ruffles, standing beautifully in front of the window. Clasping her hands in excitement, Millie praises her. "You look really beautiful." Sophia blushes slightly and chuckles, "Hee, thank you." Downstairs, Louis stands in his formal military attire, adjusting his white gloves as he tells Sophia, "Sorry for making you wait." Louis stands tall, looking incredibly handsome and majestic in his dark blue and gold dress uniform with a thick fur cape. Louis casts a brief glance back and says, "Let's go," walking ahead as Sophia quietly follows behind. The grand Ballas ballroom is bustling with noble guests in magnificent attire, all turning their heads as the Duke and Duchess arrive. As they walk through the crowd, gossiping guests whisper behind their fans, murmuring, "I thought it was unusual to see them together, but look, their outfits don't even match in terms of design. So it was true that they were on bad terms and weren't speaking to each other." The crowd's whispers turn to financial gossip. Speaking of strained relationships, there was a popular investment opportunity, a shop that apparently went out of business because of a fight between the shop owner and his wife. Many people reportedly lost a lot of money because of it. Sophia lowers her head, feeling humiliated. Sophia looks up in surprise as a sudden announcement echoes through the grand hall. The crowd parts as the elderly king of the kingdom, wearing his golden crown and a ceremonial white robe, makes his grand entrance. Sophia and Louis bow deeply before the royal throne as the king looks down at them and says, "It'll soon be a year for you two as a couple, huh?" The king kindly inquires, "Are you having any fights?" Louis bows politely and lies, "No, we're getting along very well." Hearing her husband's smooth lie, Sophia looks down with a deeply saddened expression, thinking, "Getting along very well? That's a complete lie." The king smiles warmly and closes his eyes, saying, "I wish to see you two have a child soon. I'm looking forward to it." As they step away from the throne, Louis immediately turns and walks away from Sophia, saying, "I'll be fine alone after this. You should stay here." Sophia is left standing alone in the ballroom, thinking sadly, "He's busy, huh?" Looking down, Sophia thinks to herself, "It's fine though, because it would just be awkward if we were together anyway." As the elderly king smiles and warmly says, "I'm looking forward to it." Standing alone in the ballroom, Sophia is suddenly approached by a smug red-haired lady in a dark gown, accompanied by two giggling companions, who asks, "Oh my, did you get left behind again?" Sophia politely replies, "No, my husband is outside greeting someone." But the red-haired lady sneers, "Is that so? I was worried because there seemed to be no conversation between you two." Leaning in close, the red-haired lady mockingly whispers, "I wonder if you're doing your best. If not, then how about you borrow the power of alcohol?" Sophia looks startled and nervous, murmuring in quiet surprise, "Huh?" The lady smiles maliciously and holds out a glass of red wine, saying, "It's not good to always have such a gloomy expression. If you're drunk, I'm sure you can seduce Lord Louis. Here, you want it?" While thinking to herself that Sophia is known to have a very low tolerance for alcohol. Looking at the shimmering glass of wine, the red-haired lady secretly plots, thinking it would be good if she got drunk and made a fool of herself. Sophia hesitates as she stares at the glass, her thoughts turning dark as she realizes alcohol is... Gently but firmly, Sophia raises her gloved hand and pushes the glass of wine away. The red-haired lady is caught completely off guard, gasping in surprise, "Huh?" Smiling with quiet confidence and grace, Sophia says, "I don't have much tolerance, you see." Lifting her skirt slightly, Sophia politely curtsies and excuses herself, walking away from the stunned trio. Watching Sophia leave, the red-haired lady stands in shock as her companions whisper behind her, saying, "I can't believe Madame Chamberlain refused, and she usually never goes against anyone." Sophia walks down the quiet corridor, thinking to herself, "I usually am unable to refuse her, but..." Clutching her hands tightly over her stomach, Sophia resolutely thinks, "For the sake of the child in my belly, I must be strong." Seeking a moment of quiet, Sophia steps out into the beautifully manicured palace gardens. Looking around the peaceful garden, Sophia wonders, will I be able to spend some peaceful time here? As she notices someone nearby. A young lady in a green gown stands in a panic, desperately clutching her torn skirt and crying out, "What do I do?" Noticing the tear in her dress, Sophia walks over and softly gasps, "Ah, that's..." before stepping forward to gently hold the young lady's hands and comfort her. Sophia inspects the damage and gently says, "I see, you certainly can't move around like this," while the tearful debutante downcastly replies, "You're right." The young lady tearfully explains her misfortune, recounting, "I stepped into the garden to calm my nerves and then this happened. Today was supposed to be my social debut. I'm so embarrassed." Looking thoughtful, Sophia kindly reassures her and says, "Please wait just a moment." Sophia quickly finds a passing palace maid and requests a sewing kit to help repair the torn dress. Sophia returns to the garden carrying a wooden sewing box, prompting the young lady to look up in quiet confusion, whispering, "Huh?" With a bright, warm smile, Sophia holds out the sewing box and asks, "Would you mind if I fix it as a temporary solution?" Sophia happily explains, "Well, my family runs a tailor shop, so I've done fully this before. If you're fine with it, then I can..." Sitting side by side on a stone bench in the warm sunshine, Sophia begins to carefully mend the torn fabric of the green dress. Focused on her task, Sophia thinks, now to make sure the tear doesn't catch attention. With expert precision, Sophia uses green thread and scissors to mend the dress, while the young debutante watches her in silent admiration. Unbeknownst to them, Duke Louis steps out and spots Sophia from a distance, looking on with an intense expression. Watching Sophia work so gently and skillfully in the garden, Louis thinks to himself in surprise, what on earth is she doing in a place like this? With a swift, satisfying snip of her scissors, Sophia cuts the thread and finishes the repair. Sophia looks up with a sweet, hopeful smile and asks, "What do you think?" Standing up, the young debutante looks at her dress in utter amazement, gasping, "Whoa, amazing! It looks like it was originally made this way," as she sees a beautiful green bow covering the tear. Overjoyed, the young lady smiles brightly and exclaims, "Now I can finally head back to the ball." Clasping Sophia's hands with immense gratitude, she says, "I can't believe you fixed it so beautifully." The two young women share a beautiful moment of connection, holding hands and smiling warmly at each other in the sunlit garden. Looking at her new friend, Sophia is deeply touched, her eyes shining with happiness. The warmth of the moment triggers a nostalgic memory from Sophia's childhood, recalling when she watched her mother happily serving customers in their tailor shop. As a young girl, Sophia had watched her mother and a customer laughing together, realizing how much joy sewing and helping others could bring. Back in the present, Sophia beams with genuine warmth and tells the young lady, "I hope you will enjoy the ball." Watching her from behind the wall, Louis is captivated by her radiant, happy expression, thinking to himself, so she can make such an expression too. Later, a dark carriage rattles down the cobbled streets as the couple leaves the palace, with Louis sitting inside and staring quietly at Sophia. Sensing his heavy gaze, Sophia looks up, causing a grumpy Louis to quickly turn his head away and feign indifference. Confused by his behavior, Sophia looks at him and thinks, what is it now? He looks even more grumpy than usual. Sophia looks down at her lap with a heavy heart, wondering, is it because the king brought up the topic of children? He really doesn't want a child, does he? Sophia pauses in deep thought, resolving to tell him the truth, thinking, if that's the case? Gathering her courage, Sophia speaks up, saying, Louis, I have something I'd like to discuss, to which Louis coldly replies, what is it? Looking down sadly, Sophia softly admits, the truth is, I haven't been feeling very well lately. This information is not medical advice or a diagnosis. Please see a healthcare professional or seek care. Looking up at him with a serious, vulnerable expression, Sophia hesitates before saying, I was thinking. Sophia gathers her courage and says that we should refrain from doing that thing we did once every 2 months for a little while thinking to herself, I can't tell him I want to stop because I'm pregnant, but this should be what Louis wants anyway. Sophia looks down sadly, thinking, however, since we only kept doing it because of his parents' orders, as she remembers how his parents sternly demanded, I'm telling you to have an heir quickly. Looking up at her husband with a nervous, beating heart, Sophia softly asks, what do you think? Louis sits in silence across from her in the carriage, staring at her with a calm but unreadable expression. Closing his eyes, Louis finally replies, fine, but Louis turns his head slightly and coldly instructs her, make sure my parents don't find out about this. Surprised but relieved, Sophia looks down and quietly replies, yes. Louis turns back to the window, staring quietly into the golden evening light as the carriage rolls down the street. Later that night, in his dimly lit bedchamber, Louis sits up in bed in his nightclothes, thinking, since my parents ordered it, I didn't think Sophia would be the one to suggest it. Looking down at his hands, Louis thinks to himself in quiet disbelief, so we don't have to do it anymore, huh? A faint, relieved smile appears on his face as he chuckles, thinking, to think that simply stopping our attempts to produce an heir would bring me this much relief. Clasped tightly, his hands begin to tremble as his thoughts turn dark. It can't be helped. Even if we had a child, Louis is suddenly gripped by a terrifying childhood memory of his father looming over him in a red-splattered dark room and hitting him. The young, tearful Louis is left clutching his bruised and swollen cheek in absolute fear and isolation. Back in the present, Louis is gripped by cold sweat, clenching his teeth as the painful trauma of his childhood abuse resurfaces. Grabbing his head in distress, Louis tries to calm his breathing, telling himself, calm down, I don't have to worry about it for a while. Louis runs a hand through his dark hair, looking weary as he thinks, in a way, I suppose I have to thank Sophia for this. He recalls the radiant, joyful smile Sophia had shared with the young debutante in the garden, thinking, I've never seen her make a face like that. He contrasts it with her usual demeanor around him, thinking, at home, she's always, as he remembers her downcast, sad expression. Louis lies flat on his back, staring up at the dark ceiling as he wonders, is it because I'm around her? He lets out a long, heavy sigh into the empty bedroom, murmuring, Looking at the grand, empty bed, Louis rolls over onto his side and mutters, this is ridiculous. The next morning, bright sunshine floods Sophia's cozy bedroom as she happily sits up in bed working on some embroidery. Suddenly, a sharp wave of nausea hits Sophia, causing her to gasp, as she quickly covers her mouth. Her maid, Millie, walks in holding a tea tray and says sympathetically, morning sickness is tough, isn't it? Sophia gives her a gentle, tired smile and replies, I'm still not used to it. Millie worries for her, saying, please don't overdo it, prompting Sophia to sweetly reply, I won't, thank you. As Millie places the tea set down next to a sealed letter, Sophia reflects, the ball itself was the same as always. Holding her embroidery hoop, Sophia looks up at Millie as she thinks, but actually, Millie holds a small hand mirror and gasps in amazement. That's amazing! To be able to fix a torn dress right then and there? Sophia giggles at her maid's dramatic praise, saying, hee hee, you're exaggerating it, Millie. Looking down at her stitching, Sophia happily thinks, I was able to use the sewing skills my mother taught me to help someone else. Sophia recalls standing gracefully in her beautiful ball gown while a chibi Millie cheers in support. Millie suddenly puffs her cheeks and fumes in anger, shouting, "It's unbelievable that he didn't say a single word. He should have at least said something," as she complains about Louis's cold reaction to Sophia's beautiful dress. Sophia gently smiles and defends her husband, saying, "Louis just isn't interested in that kind of thing. I'm sure of it." Millie looks down and sighs, "Honestly, the Lord is just too cold." Millie narrows her eyes with a knowing look and adds, "Compared to him?" Millie points to the desk and continues, "On top of the letter, Sophia reads a letter from Elliot, which reads, 'I was so happy to see you again after all this time,' alongside a cute chibi drawing of him writing at his desk." Millie points out the beautiful feather pen in a velvet-lined box, reading Elliot's note, "He even gave you this lovely pen as a gift. I chose it because I thought you'd like the design." Millie clasps her hands to her cheeks, surrounded by beautiful pink blossoms, and exclaims, "You can really tell how much he treasures you, my lady." Sophia smiles warmly and takes the letter from her, saying, "You're right. It makes me happy that he looks out for me like this." Looking at the elegant handwriting, Sophia notes, "It seems there's a charity bazaar hosted by the royal family." The invitation shows a bustling marketplace of stalls, with Elliot's letter reading, "There's an invitation that comes with it. I heard there will be an event selling handmade goods. I thought it might be a nice change of pace. Take a look if you'd like." Sophia holds the letter and says, "Oh, that sounds lovely," while Millie smiles and agrees, "It does." Sophia looks down thoughtfully, her warm smile fading slightly as she thinks, but Sophia imagines herself standing alone under a spotlight at a high society social gathering, thinking anxiously, "It seems like the kind of place where high society gathers. It's making me a little anxious. Selling my own work, huh?" Millie happily encourages her, gesturing excitedly with the tray as she speaks. Sophia covers her mouth and giggles softly, telling her, "Elliot said the same thing." Looking down at her beautiful rose embroidery, Sophia smiles and thinks, "I suppose I should give it some consideration." A scenic view of the beautiful blue sky with soft, bright clouds transitions the scene to a peaceful new morning. Millie holds a small note and kindly tells Sophia, "I'll buy this thread for you, so please stay put and rest, my lady." To which Sophia softly replies, "Sure, I will." Sophia sits peacefully in her sunlit bedroom, carefully embroidering a pink flower on her hoop, when a sudden, loud thumping sound echoes from outside her room. Startled by the sudden disturbance, Sophia turns her head as a harsh, angry voice shouts from the hallway, "What the hell? Get out of my way!" followed by a maid's desperate plea to please wait. Recognizing the voice, Sophia wonders in concern, "That voice? Lord Darius?" as she quickly slips her shoes on to see what is happening. Struggling with a sudden wave of anxiety and morning sickness, Sophia gasps for breath and covers her mouth, trying to compose herself before heading out. Sophia carefully steps out into the grand hallway, her eyes widening in shock as she hears someone furiously screaming, "Money! Give me money!" She spots a flushed, clearly intoxicated Lord Darius stumbling down the hallway with a worried maid frantically trailing behind him. As Sophia wonders what he is doing there in such a state, the maid tries to guide him, saying, "Let me show the way to the room, sir," only for Darius to turn his glare on her. Gripped by apprehension, Sophia watches from around the corner as Darius menacingly towers over the maid, demanding, "Are you trying to give me orders?" Horrified by his aggression, Sophia freezes in place, protectively wrapping her hand over her stomach. Darius violently grabs the maid by her collar, snarling, "You've got some nerve," while the terrified maid cries out, "No, that's not what I eek." Witnessing Darius raise his fist to strike the helpless maid, Sophia's eyes widen in sheer horror at the impending violence. Throwing caution to the wind, Sophia rushes forward and throws her arms around the crying maid, shielding her as she screams, "Please stop." Staring down the aggressive noble, Sophia firmly commands, "Let her go," prompting a stunned Darius to release the maid and mutter, "You think someone like you could—" Incensed by her interference, Darius raises his fist towards Sophia, roaring, "Tell me what to do," as Sophia prepares herself for the blow. Sophia tightly shuts her eyes and braces herself, terrified of the violent strike that is about to land. Darius swings his fist down in a blind rage, shouting, "Don't you dare! Don't tell me what to do!" Sophia groans in anticipation of the pain, squeezing her eyes shut as the shadow of his fist looms over her. Sensing that the blow never landed, a confused Sophia slowly opens her eyes, wondering, "Bah!" She looks up to find Duke Louis standing protectively in front of her, having intercepted Darius's arm with an ironclad grip. Darius winces in intense pain, struggling against his brother's overwhelming strength as he pleads, "Brother, let go of," while Louis stares at him with cold, murderous blue eyes. Sophia looks up at her husband, her heart pounding with a mixture of shock and immense relief. Trembling maids drop to their knees in profound gratitude and relief as the tense confrontation finally halts. Sophia gently places a reassuring hand on the crying maid's shoulder, asking, "Are you okay?" To which the maid tearfully replies, "Yes." Restoring order to the chaotic scene, Sophia instructs the other maids, "Could you prepare a room for Lord Darius?" And they quickly comply, answering, "Right away." Sophia smooths down her dress and takes a deep breath, trying to regain her composure after the terrifying ordeal. Looking at the restrained Darius, Sophia says with quiet authority, "Lord Darius, I will show you to your room, so please stay there." Darius struggles and yells, "You, how insulting," as Louis effortlessly twists his arm behind his back, keeping him completely immobilized. Towering over his younger brother, Louis says in a low, terrifyingly calm voice, "You're the one who has done something insulting." House guards arrive to take custody of Darius, with a nervous maid guiding them, saying, "This way, please." Louis and Sophia stand silently in the middle of the hallway, watching as the guards escort the shouting, restrained Darius away. Letting out a long, exhausted sigh of relief, Sophia turns to her husband and softly says, "Thank." Before she can finish her sentence, Sophia's vision swims and her body suddenly goes limp, tilting backward as she begins to collapse. Louis's eyes widen in sheer panic and shock as he realizes she is falling. Moving with lightning-fast reflexes, Louis catches Sophia in his arms before she hits the cold floor, frantically calling out, "Hey, what's wrong? Hey!" Realizing she is completely unresponsive, Louis holds her close and calls out to the nearby maid, "Did she lose consciousness? Call the doctor to Sophia's room." To which the maid quickly responds, "Understood." Without wasting a single moment, Louis scoops Sophia up in his arms, his heart racing with worry. Holding her protectively against his chest, Louis swiftly carries his unconscious wife down the hallway toward her chambers. Inside the quiet, dimly lit bedchamber, Louis sits silently in a chair by Sophia's bed, refusing to leave her side as she sleeps. Hearing a sudden knock at the door, Louis turns his head and quietly commands, "Come in." Millie rushes into the room, dropping her things in absolute panic as she cries, "Lady Sophia, what on earth happened?" And Louis replies, "She suddenly collapsed. I have called the doctor." Terrified for her lady's well-being, Millie quickly runs to fetch water and clean cloths to tend to her. Millie gently wipes Sophia's brow while Louis looks on with a heavy, somber expression as Millie softly murmurs, "Lady Sophia?" Looking down at the sleeping Duchess, Millie notes with a small sigh of relief, her breathing seems to be fine. Louis continues to watch Sophia's serene sleeping face, his mind filled with complex emotions and deep concern for her. Later, the family doctor arrives and examines Sophia, reassuring Louis and Millie it's probably due to fatigue and stress. There won't be any problems if she rests. Feeling a slight wave of relief, Louis quietly nods and replies, "I see." Keeping her lady's secret safe, a worried Millie whispers to the doctor, "Please keep it a secret," while thinking how grateful she is that he kept his promise to keep Sophia's pregnancy hidden. Millie then politely addresses the doctor, saying, "Well then, since it's already so late, I'll prepare a room for you," as Louis stands quietly in the background. Left alone with his thoughts, Louis gazes back at Sophia's bed, his expression unreadable as the gravity of her condition weighs heavily on his mind. Inside a beautifully decorated dressing room, a vanity table holds a variety of elegant accessories. A close-up reveals a box containing delicately crafted lace handkerchiefs, matching hair bows, gloves, and a pocketbook with a monogram, prompting the question, "Made by Sophia?" Duke Louis walks silently toward the vanity table, his heavy steps echoing in the quiet room. Looking at the handmade goods, a flashback of Sophia diligently sewing alongside another lady comes to mind. Now that I think about it, back then too. He gazes down at the beautifully decorated box, wondering if she was always this skilled at sewing. Louis picks up a small blue monogrammed handkerchief, looking at it thoughtfully. I feel like I've seen this before. He remembers a time when Sophia approached him hesitantly, holding the same blue handkerchief and saying, "Misunderstandings can create profound barriers." Instead of listening, he had said, "I'm busy right now, so please come back later." Heartbroken by his cold rejection, Sophia lowered her head and whispered, "Please forgive me," as she watched him walk away down the grand hallway. Staring at the handkerchief in his hand, Louis is filled with deep regret as he realizes, "And I haven't made any effort to get to know her." Memories of the day's events flash through his mind, from her brave action, the fact that she would risk her life for her servants, to her history with her brother-in-law, and that she was likely treated terribly by Darius. Standing back to back with Sophia in a dark, empty space surrounded by scattered papers, Louis clutches the handkerchief, realizing with heavy regret, I didn't know anything at all. Returning to the present, Louis sits quietly by Sophia's bedside, watching over his unconscious wife as she rests. A concerned maid gently peeks into the room, whispering, "Master?" Sophia tosses restlessly in her sleep, groaning in discomfort. Ah. Seeing her distress, Louis reaches out and gently places his gloved hand over hers to comfort her. Looking down at her pale, suffering face with a deeply pained expression, Louis softly whispers, "I'm sorry." Watching the scene from the doorway, the maid is visibly touched and surprised by the Duke's rare show of tenderness and remorse. In the darkness of her dream, a harsh, angry voice begins to scream from Sophia's past. A young Sophia flinches in terror as she is cruelly yelled at, "Don't come close to me, you useless girl!" Tears well up in the young girl's eyes as she trembles from the verbal abuse. She falls to her knees, surrounded by the dark shadows of whispering onlookers, as a voice sneers, "You just get in the way." Pointing fingers surround her from all sides as the cruel insults continue. "You despicable thing!" Sophia covers her ears and cries out in agony, desperate to block out the hateful voices. Ugh! She stands helpless in the middle of a mocking crowd, her mind echoing with their hurtful words. "You're a hindrance. You despicable thing." Suddenly, she is violently pushed from behind, shattering her surroundings like glass. Falling hard to the floor, Sophia screams in pain and looks up with tears streaming down her face. She trembles as the dark, spiderweb-covered figures of her stepmother and stepsister loom over her. Stepmother Marlin. Her stepmother Marlin looks down at her with a wicked, mocking smirk. "You know it already, right? You're not needed by anyone." Her stepsister joins in, smiling maliciously as she taunts, "You're such a loner, stepsister." Sinking into despair, Sophia desperately clutches her head and cries out, I am not alone." Suddenly, a bright light breaks through the darkness, causing Sophia's eyes to widen in shock. Ah! Through the light, a handsome young man with silver white hair stands before her. As the man turns his back and walks away, Sophia desperately reaches her hand out, pleading, "Wait, father!" Left alone on the cold floor, she weeps bitterly, whispering, "Father." Just as she feels completely abandoned, a warm hand reaches down and holds hers, pulling her back toward the light. Sophia looks up to see her beautiful mother, with silver hair and bright blue eyes, smiling down at her with endless warmth and love. Her mother pulls her into a tight, comforting embrace, wrapping her in unconditional love as white flower petals float around them. Back in her bed, tears slide down Sophia's cheeks as she sleeps, her expression finally softening into peace. Slowly, Sophia's eyes flutter open as she begins to awaken from her long dream. Sophia sits up in her quiet, dimly lit room, looking around in confusion. "I was asleep?" Wiping away her tears, she holds her hand to her cheek, softly whispering, "Mother." The door suddenly flies open, and Millie rushes into the room with a look of immense relief. "Lady Sophia, you've finally woken up." Hurrying to the bedside, Millie asks anxiously, "How are you feeling now?" Sophia smiles gently to reassure her maid, replying, "I'm fine now. Thank you, Millie." Millie delivers the doctor's diagnosis there was nothing wrong and that everything would be fine as long as you rested, adding in a whisper, "Please rest assured that your secret is still safe." Sophia gently touches her stomach with a relieved smile, thinking, "I'm glad my baby is safe." Looking up, Sophia asks with concern, "So then, what about Lord Darius? Is everything all right?" Millie explains, Lord Darius seemed to have calmed down after speaking with the master and has already returned home. Sophia lets out a sigh of relief, saying, "That's good." Millie reveals the truth behind his sudden visit. However, the reason he came here was because the business he invested in went bankrupt, so he came to borrow money. Sophia thinks to herself, judging by how things looked, I can't believe he gave up so easily. Sophia looks thoughtfully at Millie, saying, "So that's why things were so chaotic." Remembering how Duke Louis intercepted Darius's attack, Sophia smiles warmly, thinking, "I'm so glad Louis came to help." Sophia looks at Millie in surprise and asks, "Is that so?" Millie continues to explain to Sophia, "He seemed very worried. Even after the doctor arrived, he kept watching over you." Millie looks thoughtful as she continues. Also, Sophia remembers how Duke Louis held her hand and whispered, "I'm sorry." Millie wonders what the master truly feels for Sophia, while Sophia herself finds it completely unbelievable that Louis would be worried about her. Gripping the sheets, Sophia wonders what could have brought about his sudden change of heart, remembering how he had come to her rescue the day before. Looking back at his actions, she admits to herself that she never thought the day would come when she would find him so reliable. Shaking her head, Sophia tries to temper her expectations, telling herself that this is likely just a passing whim and that she shouldn't let her feelings be easily swayed. Despite her doubts, she cannot deny the reality of his assistance, reminding herself that he truly did help her when she was in danger. Sophia decides that she must personally go and express her gratitude to him. A gentle knock echoes at the door as a voice calls out, "Excuse me?" Millie and Sophia look toward the entrance as someone asks, "Madam, do you have some time?" Recognizing the visitors, Sophia asks them, "You two are from earlier. Is something the problem?" One of the maids explains, "We came here because we wanted to thank you, madam," leaving Sophia quite surprised. To Sophia's amazement, the two maids bowed deeply before her in a profound gesture of respect. They expressed their heartfelt gratitude, saying, "If you weren't there, madam, who knows what could have happened to her?" Sophia's lips part slightly as she is deeply moved by their sincere appreciation. Offering a warm, gentle smile, Sophia replies, "I'm glad that you're all right." Later that night, the mansion falls into a quiet stillness under the soft glow of the crescent moon. Sophia knocks gently on the Duke's study door and announces, "This is Sophia, please excuse me." Opening the door, Sophia enters the study as Louis looks up from his paperwork and asks, "What is it?" To which she replies, "I wanted to express my gratitude." Approaching his desk, Sophia bows slightly and says, "Thank you very much for helping me out. I also heard that you carried me after I fainted." Louis turns his gaze back to his papers and dismisses it quietly, saying, "Not really, it's no big deal at all." Watching his indifferent reaction, Sophia thinks to herself that Louis is still Louis, remaining as cold and aloof as ever. Preparing to take her leave, she softly says, "Well then." Just as she turns to go, Louis suddenly asks her, "Do you like sewing?" halting her in her tracks. Looking up from his desk, Louis explains, "I saw the things you made in your room." Startled, Sophia blushes slightly and replies, "Ah, yes, I indeed do enjoy sewing." Louis gazes at her silently, his expression unreadable as a quiet pause fills the room. Feeling a bit self-conscious under his intense stare, Sophia hesitantly asks, "Is there any problem?" To her shock, Louis tells her, "I'll cover the expenses. Go ahead and buy whatever materials you need." But she quickly waves her hands, responding, I can't accept that." Louis points to his desk and explains, "Didn't you help the servant from Darius? Thanks for that." Sophia is utterly stunned, unable to believe that Louis is actually thanking her for her actions. Gathering her composure, Sophia looks at him and asks, "Are you unsatisfied with my thank you?" Realizing that it would be discourteous to repeatedly refuse his offer, she decides to accept. With a brilliant, happy smile, Sophia replies, "No, I'd be happy to. Thank you very much." Captivated by her smile for a brief moment, Louis simply nods and answers, "Yeah." Meanwhile, Darius sits in a dark room, drinking wine and cursing angrily. "Damn it, every single one of them is being so stingy. I need capital to get my money back." But fuming with rage, he thinks, if only they would just hand over the money without a fuss. In a fit of temper, Darius violently slams his wine glass onto the table. Gritting his teeth, Darius seethes with resentment towards his brother and sister-in-law, thinking, how dare he kick out his own family, especially that woman? A sinister, malicious grin spreads across Darius's face as he devises a dark plan. The next day, the sun shines brightly over the bustling city streets. Inside a lavish fabric boutique, Millie looks at the stunning textiles and remarks, "For that master to offer his thanks?" Millie smiles and adds, "Yes, I wonder what he's got in mind." Sophia giggles and agrees with a warm, lighthearted, "That's true." Sometime later, Sophia enjoys an elegant outdoor afternoon tea with her friend in a beautiful garden. Looking at the invitation in her hands, Sophia asks in surprise, "Me at a charity bazaar?" She realizes it's the bazaar Elliot told me about. Her friend beams with excitement and says, "Yes, an acquaintance of mine is recruiting participants. And with your skill in fixing up my dress so beautifully, I think everyone would love it. There's a practice session beforehand too, so if you could join, I'd feel much more confident. What do you say?" "Very well." "That's wonderful." I was hesitating, but I'm sure it'll be a hit. Lady Sophia, your creations are bound to be popular. I think everyone will love them. If people actually want the things I make, that would make me so happy. Just like Mother. Sophia looks down with a gentle, nostalgic smile, feeling a warm connection to her mother's memory. Millie holds up a roll of vibrant purple fabric and asks, "Lady Sophia, how about this color?" To which Sophia smiles and replies, "Oh, that's lovely." As the sun begins to set, the evening sky is painted in warm, glowing shades of amber and pink. Back in the comfort of her room, Sophia sits at her sewing table under the soft glow of the window, meticulously crafting her designs. Millie assists her by holding the fabric, remarking, "We're lucky they had such wonderful fabric," while Sophia replies, "I was hoping to make some clothes while we're at it." Sophia spreads out the textured, pattern-embroidered light green fabric to examine its quality. Sophia admires the gorgeous material with a bright smile, thinking, "What should I make for the practice session? I have to do some prototypes." Sophia loses herself in her work, sewing passionately day and night in different outfits as her collection grows. Dressed in her newly completed ruffled pink dress with her hair in an elegant braid, Sophia steps out onto the balcony to take a break. Wiping a light bead of sweat from her forehead, Sophia smiles softly to herself and thinks, I got too absorbed again. Looking at the mismatched fabrics, Sophia mutters, this color doesn't quite work, as Millie rushes in with a worried look, scolding, Lady Sophia, you shouldn't hole up in your room too much. Sophia gently places her hand over her stomach, thinking of the precious life growing inside her. After all, as she walks down the Grand Palace steps, she stops suddenly in surprise. Sophia looks out at a beautiful, sweeping garden filled with bright golden buttercups blooming under the warm afternoon sun. Her purple eyes widen in shock as she catches sight of a familiar figure waiting for her. Taking a deep breath, Sophia steps through the double doors, telling herself, a change of pace is important. Just as she thinks, time to head back to my room and keep going, she hears approaching footsteps and turns to find Duke Louis standing before her in his military uniform. Spotting him, she softly speaks, Oh, Louis. Sophia beams at him with a radiant, warm smile surrounded by beautiful pink roses, saying, Welcome home. Captured by her stunning smile and beautiful dress, Louis stares at her, completely frozen in shock. Sophia takes a light, elegant step forward, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Louis looks at her in her beautiful, ruffled pink gown, letting out a soft, dazed, ah. Staring at her, Louis's heart skips a beat as he thinks to himself, she was smiling. At the Charity Bazaar's practice session, Sophia sits quietly and a bit nervously at the tea table as the other noblewomen chat. All right, let's prepare the pieces for exhibit, make the most of this practice session to get ready for the bazaar day. One of the ladies remarks cheerfully, it's fun making things together, as another agrees we can share feedback. Relieved by the peaceful and welcoming atmosphere, Sophia thinks it's a different vibe from high society. As she carefully hand-sews a beautiful green lace ribbon, she thinks, I like this kind of gathering. Sophia looks around the table with a soft, content smile, watching the other ladies work diligently on their embroidery. One of the noblewomen gasps in astonishment at Sophia's beautiful creations, exclaiming, My goodness, you've made so many already? Sophia looks up in surprise and embarrassment as her friend in the green dress approaches her table. Her friend proudly claps her hands and announces to the group, the Duchess is incredibly skilled at sewing. The other ladies gather around the table in admiration, with one admitting, I had no idea. One of the ladies nervously holds up her embroidery piece and asks, I want the back of my embroidery to look just as neat, but I'm struggling with the thread ends. She eagerly looks at Sophia and asks, any advice? While another lady chimes in, me too, please teach me. Surprised and deeply touched by their enthusiasm, Sophia thinks to herself, hearing that from them makes me so happy. Smiling warmly, Sophia begins to demonstrate her technique, saying, it was tricky for me at first too, but once you learned the trick to it, the final quality was totally different. The ladies watch intently as Sophia patiently explains, because the backing varies with the stitch type, in this particular instance, the lady smiles brightly in realization, replying, I see, that's very helpful. After trying it herself, she asks, like this? And another lady admiringly remarks, oh my, that's turned out beautifully. While Sophia is happily surrounded by the warm and admiring crowd, a red-haired woman sits alone in the background, glaring at her with cold resentment. Gripping her sewing fabric with intense anger, the red-haired woman clenches her fist, trembling with silent, bitter jealousy. With a dark, venomous scowl, she glares directly at Sophia, harboring a deep and malicious resentment. Pregnant and gone in 5 months. Chapter 11. Meanwhile, Lady Brenda clenches her fists in silent frustration, her eyes blazing with jealousy as she glares across the room. 2 noblewomen approach her table and ask, oh, Lady Brenda, why are you alone in a place like this? Sitting by herself at the massive tea table, Brenda tries to keep up appearances before her peers. She quickly forces a laugh and waves her hands, saying, it's nothing. I was just taking a little break. The ladies look on with curiosity and eagerly ask, can we see it? Brenda breaks into a cold sweat and stammers, no, I'm still, while another woman smiles smugly in the background. The smug woman approaches Brenda with a hand outstretched, saying, as the Duchess of Elms, there's no way you haven't made anything. She snatches the white fabric from Brenda's hands and displays it to the room, saying, see, it's finished, as the other ladies whisper awkwardly among themselves. She continues to humiliate Brenda by holding up the small lace handkerchief. I'm sorry, it wasn't completely finished, but even if it's halfway done, it's very lovely. A smug, malicious grin spreads across her face as she whispers, indeed. Feeling completely cornered and humiliated, Brenda trembles with anger as the ladies giggle behind her back, whispering, "I don't know if it's sellable, but..." Snapping under the pressure, Brenda snatches the fabric back and yells, "Give it back!" Clutching the fabric tightly to her chest, she mutters to herself in anger, "It's still unfinished." The ladies mockingly bid her farewell, saying, "Sorry for interrupting, please do your best," leaving Brenda alone to stew in her bitter resentment. Just then, Sophia enters the room carrying a tray of sewing supplies, and Brenda thinks to herself, "I bet you're secretly enjoying watching me suffer." Sophia looks over in surprise, asking, "Huh?" as Brenda recalls her past feelings. Her dark, timid attitude irritated me so much. I couldn't accept that someone like her would become the Duchess. In a memory of their past encounters, Brenda remembers how she used to mock Sophia. "I looked down on you and said nothing but horrible things." She tells herself, so I'm certain she's come to get her revenge. Standing face to face with Sophia, Brenda says defensively, "I'm fully aware that you've come here to laugh at me." She turns away with a bitter smile, saying, "I don't really care, even if you laugh at me." Sophia stands there with a completely puzzled and innocent look on her face. Smiling gently, Sophia replies warmly, "This is a practice session." Pointing toward the crowded tables behind her, Sophia explains, "The reason I came here is that the spot I was at got too crowded." Brenda stares at her in shock, thinking, is she saying that she doesn't care about everything I've done to her until now? Or the fact that there were people who laughed at me now? Brenda's green eyes widen in pure astonishment as she looks at Sophia. Looking at Brenda's floral patterned skirt, Sophia politely says, "I'm in your space, aren't I? I'll look for somewhere else." As Sophia turns to leave, Brenda impulsively grabs her sleeve and asks, "In exchange, teach me your secret." Sophia stops in her tracks and looks back at Brenda in surprise. With a radiant, heartfelt smile, Sophia replies, "Sure, if you're okay with it." Sitting side by side, Sophia patiently guides Brenda through the sewing process step by step. Holding up her newly improved work, Brenda beams with joy alongside Sophia and exclaims, "It turned out so pretty." Feeling a sense of accomplishment, Brenda proudly says, "I think I've got it now. At this rate, looks like I'll make it in time for the bazaar." A soft, genuine warmth returns to Brenda's eyes as she looks at Sophia's kind demeanor. Sophia claps her hands in delight, showing herself to be incredibly sweet and thoughtful. Brenda looks down, blushing with embarrassment as she confesses, "I only said nasty things to you before. I'm sorry." Sophia quickly waves her hands to ease Brenda's guilt, replying, "No need to apologize. If anything, I am truly sorry. I was rude to you, using my poor health as an excuse." Holding Sophia's hands warmly across the table, Brenda admits, "I was judging you by my own standards." Sophia looks down and opens up, saying, "I felt uncomfortable in social gatherings." She continues softly, "And needlessly inferior. I avoided talking as much as possible. How pathetic of me. That's why I think that your bold stance..." Sophia looks up at Brenda with a bright smile of admiration and finishes, "Is so amazing, Duchess of Elms." Flustered by the unexpected praise, Brenda blushes and asks, "Is that a compliment?" Sophia giggles and says, "Of course, but you can be a little pushy sometimes." Comically struck by Sophia's bluntness, Brenda groans, "Ugh," as Sophia advises, "So maybe moderation is best." Brenda sweat drops and replies, "I'll keep that in mind." Looking at Sophia warmly, Brenda asks, "So can I call you Sophia?" With a brilliant, happy smile, Sophia replies, "Yes, I'd love to." Brenda? The two laugh and talk happily, finally building a bridge of genuine friendship. As night falls over the grand mansion, the crescent moon shines softly through the window of Sophia's room. Sophia sits on her sofa, happily arranging the beautiful handmade pieces she crafted, thinking to herself, "I'm glad I went there today." Millie enters the room and gasps in astonishment at the collection of ribbons and pouches, asking, "You made all these today?" Millie clasps her hands together excitedly, predicting it will be a bidding war, while Sophia sits on the sofa, smiling gently and saying she would be thrilled if that happened. Sophia looks down with a gentle, serene smile on her face. Determined to make the charity bazaar a success, Sophia spends her time diligently working at her sewing machine to craft beautiful items. An array of Sophia's exquisite creations is displayed, including a lovely cream-colored dress adorned with delicate floral embroidery and various handmade pouches and ribbons. Duke Louis walks down the silent, dimly lit mansion corridor towards Sophia's room, noticing a soft glow of light spilling from her open door. Standing at the doorway, Duke Louis gazes inside and spots a beautifully arranged collection of handmade accessories on the table. He recalls seeing Sophia working passionately alongside a maid, sharing ideas as they prepared garments for the charity bazaar. Duke Lewis stares quietly, his expression softening with a mixture of warmth, admiration, and deep contemplation. The day of the charity bazaar finally arrives, filling the town square with colorful tents, hanging banners, and bustling crowds. Duke Lewis stands amidst the crowd with another military officer, watching the lively event unfold. At the bustling bazaar, the announcement rings out that the charity bazaar is finally starting, with Sophia's beautifully decorated stall displaying her handmade items. Millie eagerly checks in with Sophia, who smiles warmly and confirms that she is ready for the event. Sophia's eyes suddenly widen in surprise as she spots someone unexpected in the crowd. A shadow of dread falls over her as she watches 3 figures walking away from her through the bazaar. She recognizes the cold profile of her brother-in-law, Lord Darius, who has just arrived at the bazaar. She watches the 3 figures walk further into the crowded street, her heart sinking with anxiety. Sophia looks deeply unsettled, thinking to herself, I can't believe my father-in-law and the others are here too. She is suddenly struck by a painful memory of Lord Darius raising his fist to strike her in anger, recalling that she hasn't seen him since that terrifying incident. Clutching her hands tightly against her chest, Sophia trembles as she worries about what he might do if he encounters her again. Taking a deep breath, Sophia tries to reassure herself, remembering that today is a prestigious royal-hosted event, and surely nothing bad will happen. An announcement echoes through the plaza. We will now begin the charity bazaar. Everyone, please enjoy yourselves. Millie raises her fists in encouragement, saying, Yes, I'm counting on you, as Sophia smiles back. Visitors quickly gather at Sophia's stall, eagerly looking through the beautifully crafted goods while the maids cheerfully attend to them. A lady in a green dress and another lady admire Sophia's beige dress on the mannequin. In another panel, Sophia walks gracefully past a beautiful courtyard fountain. Intrigued by the crowd, 2 noble women decide to check out the stall, noting how incredibly popular it seems to be. One of the ladies holds up a gorgeous red rose hair ornament in her gloved hands, admiring the work of Lady Chamberlain. The noble women admire the beautifully stitched clothes and accessories at the stall, while Sophia stands near the fountain, watching from a distance with a peaceful smile. Looking at the joyful faces of the customers, Sophia clutches her chest, thinking, seeing people this happy over something I made feels incredible. Sophia walks gracefully across the stone pavement, her elegant blue heels clicking softly. Stopping by a toy stall, Sophia spots a cute teddy bear and thinks, so cute, it reminds me of the one I gave Elliot. Admiring the bold and beautiful designs of other stalls, Sophia finds the experience educational, unaware that Darius is walking nearby. Nearby, Darius complains loudly to the maids at a stall, complaining that all their items look cheap and asking if they have anything more luxurious. Walking away with a look of pure disgust, Darius mutters in annoyance that everything made by these amateurs is incredibly tacky. Glaring at the ground as he walks, Darius grumbles to himself, I can't believe father would even come to a place like this. He recalls a conversation in his father's study where his father dismissively questioned why they should bother with the charity bazaar, to which Darius insisted that royal events are important. Darius remembers how his father coldly told him he wouldn't understand, forcing Darius to nervously smile and assure him that he also thought it was important. Clenching his teeth in silent fury, Darius thinks, I'm doing this only because that bastard is watching over. Darius suddenly stops in his tracks as something catches his eye. Looking ahead, he spots Sophia's highly popular stall and mutters, so that's Sophia's place. Shoving his hand into his pocket, a dark, malicious grin spreads across Darius's face as he thinks, well, since I've come all this way, I might as well enjoy myself. As the bazaar nears its end, Sophia walks through the crowd, wondering how her stall is currently doing. Suddenly, a sharp, shocked scream rings out from the crowd, prompting a startled Sophia to ask, what's the matter? A woman gasps in horror as she holds a light blue pouch, exclaiming, there's a needle in the product, while her friend checks if she is hurt. Hearing this, Sophia is frozen in shock, a cold sweat breaking out on her face. The customer asks angrily where she bought the item, and her friend points directly towards Sophia's stall, saying she just bought it there. Sophia's eyes widen in pure horror and disbelief as she gasps, mine? The ladies recognize Sophia, realizing it's Lady Chamberlain's stall, and approach her in anger, demanding to know what this means. Stunned, Sophia insists that such a mistake is impossible and politely asks to inspect the pouch herself, carefully taking it from the lady's hands. As Sophia pulls a long, sharp pin out of the fabric, she recognizes it with absolute dread, a dressmaker's pin. The surrounding crowd of noblewomen murmurs in shock, and one of them points a finger at Sophia, yelling that not checking her products for dangerous items is absolutely unbelievable. Distressed and sweating, Sophia desperately tries to defend her work, exclaiming, no, everything was properly inspected. Sophia turns to face the crowd of accusing noblewomen, gesturing as she explains, "We even manage the number of pins, and I don't even use dressmaker's pins." The noblewomen look at Sophia with heavy skepticism as one of them retorts, "But the fact remains that it was left in." As Sophia struggles to find her words, the crowd's murmurs grow louder and more critical, dismissing her explanation as just a poor excuse. Suddenly, a mocking voice calls out from behind Sophia. I knew something like this would happen, prompting her to turn around in shock to find Lord Darius standing there. Smirking down at her, Darius says, "I told you being sloppy wouldn't do. Even for a household that handles chores, attention to detail is important." Darius gazes coldly at Sophia, his eyes filled with malice as he adds, "Yet even at a charity bazaar, you only cared about money, sister-in-law." Darius continues to humiliate her in public, asking, "As long as it sold, anything was fine to you, right?" Sophia desperately pleads, "I would never do something like that." Disregarding her protests, Darius tells her to stop making excuses, loudly pointing out, "You said you wanted to make lots and sell as many as possible, didn't you?" Darius steps close to Sophia, leaning in to whisper in a dark, threatening tone, "And yet you neglected crucial checks. This is a disgrace to the Chamberlain ducal family." A surrounding crowd of noble women gasps in dismay, whispering, "Lady Sophia did this? I never thought she was so greedy. What does she think a charity bazaar is?" Cornered by the harsh accusations, Sophia can only shake her head with tears in her eyes, crying out, "That's not true. Surrounded by the hostile crowd, Sophia is overwhelmed as they demand to know how she will solve this and tell her to take responsibility for ruining the bazaar. Standing beside a smug Darius, Sophia is completely isolated as the angry noblewomen point fingers at her in agreement. Sophia clutches her light blue handmade pouch tightly against her chest, her hands trembling as the pressure of the public humiliation mounts. Tears run down Sophia's face as she looks down in despair, her mind racing in panic as she wonders, "What should I do?" The crowd's demands echo loudly around Sophia, accusing her of ruining the charity event and yelling at her to take responsibility. Under the heavy, suffocating atmosphere, Sophia trembles in panic as Darius stands behind her with a subtle, smug grin on his face. Sophia's eyes widen with tears and pure terror as she finds herself completely helpless against the harsh accusations. Watching Sophia break down in distress, a dark, satisfied smile spreads across Darius's face as he enjoys her misery. Sophia looks down in quiet dread as a chilling realization hits her, thinking, could it be that Lord Darius put the pin in to ruin me? She stands isolated in a spotlight of despair, watching the dark silhouette of Darius behind her as she silently wonders, why going this far? The noble women talk among themselves about bringing in the authorities, while Sophia flinches in surprise as she hears them agree that it would be best. Staring blankly at the ground, Sophia tears up, realizing that at this rate, her reputation and hard work will be completely destroyed. Closing her eyes tightly as crackles of despair flash through her mind, Sophia feels entirely hopeless, whispering, Suddenly, a strong, reassuring voice cuts through the crowd, declaring, that won't be necessary, as Duke Louis appears and places his hand over hers. Sophia looks up in shock and relief to see Louis standing beside her, while Darius's smug expression instantly vanishes, turning into a look of panic. Standing tall in his uniform, Louis addresses the noblewomen, saying, "Please accept my apologies for the disturbance caused by my family." Hearing this, Sophia looks down sadly, thinking that even Louis suspects her. Surrounded by a gentle light, Louis places a hand on Sophia's shoulder and firmly declares, "However, I don't believe this was her fault." Sophia's eyes widen as she looks up at her husband in complete surprise, uttering, "Huh?" The crowd murmurs in confusion, asking what he means since Darius claims she failed to inspect the goods, while Darius starts to sweat nervously. Louis glares coldly in Darius's direction, standing firm as he states, however, he is mistaken. Louis recalls watching Sophia so diligently with a gentle, sincere smile, remembering how she warmly said she wanted the people who come to the bazaar to be happy. Defending her character, Louis explains to the crowd that her intense dedication was clear, as she figured things out with total focus and care. Standing proudly, Louis adds, "I can't imagine her overlooking the inspection given how meticulous she was." Sophia looks up at Duke Louis with wide, sparkling eyes, deeply touched and grateful that he is standing up to defend her character. The noblewoman's attitude begins to shift as they murmur, "If Lord Chamberlain, the Knight Commander, says so, maybe it was really a misunderstanding. The lady did say she inspected them." Clenching his teeth in frustration, Darius looks on with a furious expression, grumbling to himself that Louis is probably just protecting his own wife. Desperate to save face, Darius argues that there is still no proof that it wasn't his sister-in-law's fault, pointing out that a pin was actually found inside. Finding her composure thanks to Louis's unwavering support, Sophia takes a deep breath and prepares to defend herself. Sophia looks ahead with a calm and determined expression, thinking, thanks to Louis, everyone's anger is calmed down. Clutching the light blue pouch in her hands with a firm resolve, Sophia thinks, and so do my feelings. Holding up a decorative straight pin, Sophia confidently declares, to start with, what was found this time was a straight pin, but I never used that kind of pin. A noblewoman with brown hair steps forward to support Sophia, saying, it's true, the lady doesn't use straight pins. The noblewoman continues to address the crowd, saying, you all saw it at practice sessions, right? Prompting the others to realize she is right. Darius looks incredibly flustered as he tries to argue that a simple pin isn't proof, but Louis cuts him off calmly, saying, it's not just that. Sophia holds up the high-quality straight pin with a decorative pearl top, pointing out, this straight pin is from a shop famous for its high-quality goods. Sophia explains that the exclusive shop keeps meticulous records of all transactions. Looking directly at a sweating Darius, Sophia confidently asserts, a simple check at the shop would prove that I never even bought these pens. Darius shouts in absolute panic that it proves nothing, while a pair of elegant dark green shoes steps forward through rose petals as a voice firmly declares, impossible. A flustered Darius mutters, what? As a red-haired noblewoman confidently stands before him, thinking to herself that there is no way Sophia would mention something that could be so easily verified if she had actually received the high-quality straight pins as a gift. In front of Darius and the surrounding crowd, the red-haired noblewoman explains that the final checks on Sophia's work were all completed with the help of Duke Elms. Looking coldly at a sweating and nervous Darius, the red-haired lady challenges him, asking, are you saying Duke Elms' checks were lax? As footsteps approach, Duke Louis steps forward and declares that the knights will handle the matter, reassuring the crowd and telling everyone to continue enjoying the bazaar. He then turns to Darius and coldly orders, Darius, you go home first. Sweating under the critical gaze of the crowd, Darius panics and mutters, why would I, as the noblewomen whisper among themselves. Grinding his teeth in absolute humiliation and silent fury, Darius looks completely defeated and enraged by the public embarrassment. Dragging his feet in humiliation, Darius grumbles, understood, as he is forced to leave the bazaar early. Standing beside her husband Louis, Sophia lets out a deep sigh of relief, glad that the tense situation has finally settled down. Sophia meets with the red-haired noblewoman at her now cleared stall. The red-haired lady tells her that she hurried over as soon as she heard about the commotion. Facing the red-haired lady, Sophia smiles gently and expresses her gratitude, saying, no, thank you for helping. The red-haired lady looks back at Sophia with a very warm, gentle, and reassuring smile. Looking at the empty tables, the red-haired lady remarks that despite everything, the product somehow sold out already, adding that it was only to be expected of Sophia's beautiful work. Sophia smiles happily, her eyes shining as she softly responds, that makes me happy. Sophia recalls seeing a customer holding a handmade item with a bright, joyful smile, realizing that there truly are people who are happy with what she makes. Looking up at the warm, golden sky with her hand resting over her heart, Sophia smiles peacefully as she wonders if this was how her mother felt too. Sophia watches calmly from behind as her maids work diligently to pack up and clean the stall at the end of the bazaar. Suddenly, Louis calls out to her, Sophia. He looks at her with a serious expression and says, about what happened earlier, while Sophia turns to him in surprise and answers, yes. Louis and Sophia stand in the middle of the quiet street as Louis explains that searching for the owner of the pin would only end up casting suspicion on many innocent people. He adds that since no one was hurt, they deemed it best not to make a big deal out of it. Looking down thoughtfully, Louis explains that the incident will be handled as malicious mischief, but they have decided to strengthen security near the stalls from now on. Sophia responds with a soft, I see, while thinking to herself that although Lord Darius likely set the whole thing up, proving it will be very difficult. Sophia clasps her hands together, feeling a bit frustrated as she thinks about how hard it will be to prove Darius's guilt. Sophia recalls that Millie and the other stall helpers mentioned they couldn't keep an eye on Darius's movements due to the thick crowds. She looks down sadly, acknowledging the painful reality that given the stall helpers' low social standing, they wouldn't be able to actually testify against a nobleman anyway. Brushing her worries aside, Sophia smiles up at Louis and says that having extra protection from now on is very reassuring, adding that thanks to his words, she was able to clear her name. Expressing her deep gratitude, Sophia says, I was able to clear up everyone's misunderstanding. I'm grateful, which catches Louis off guard as he responds with a soft, no. Sophia looks down with a slightly worried expression, apologizing as she wonders if accusing Darius like that was rude of her. The two of them stand together under the quiet, beautiful twilight sky, a gentle and peaceful silence settling between them. Sophia looks up at Louis in surprise, letting out a soft, "Huh," as he begins to speak. Turning his face away slightly to hide his embarrassment, Louis warmly tells Sophia, "That's all?" In a luxurious study, a fist slams heavily onto the desk with an angry shout of "You fool!" as Darius stands with his head bowed in shame before his furious father. Darius sweats nervously as his father angrily yells at him, noting that he heard Darius went home early because he caused a scene at the bazaar. Holding his head in deep frustration while the Duchess stands by, the Duke furiously calls Darius a disgrace, scolding him for being incompetent and dragging Louis down, lamenting how two brothers can be so different. Staring coldly at Darius, his father sternly warns him not to get involved with Louis and the others anymore, threatening that there will be severe consequences if he does anything unnecessary again. Deeply humiliated, Darius bows his head low and submissively replies, "Yes, I apologize." The heavy wooden door of the study shuts with a click, leaving a heavy and tense silence in the corridor. Standing outside, Darius clenches his teeth in absolute fury, his eyes glowing with dark purple malice as his hatred for Louis and Sophia grows even deeper. The scene shifts to a beautifully decorated, peaceful blue drawing room filled with elegant furniture and bathed in soft morning light. Inside her room, Sophia rests on the couch while her maid Millie stands beside her holding a tray, gently urging her to take it easy and rest today after working non-stop for the bazaar. Sophia smiles and agrees. Close-up of Sophia smiling warmly as she reflects on the event, softly murmuring that it all went by so fast. Millie smiles brightly, telling Sophia that she was positively glowing with energy during the event, which brings a gentle smile to Sophia's face. Millie's expression softens with a hint of sadness and regret as she looks down, thinking to herself about the incident. Looking at Sophia, Millie expresses her frustration about the pin incident, but notes that since they have no proof Darius orchestrated it, there is really nothing they can do. Clutching her apron tightly in regret, Millie blames herself, wishing she had watched the stall much more carefully. Sophia gently sets her teacup down on the saucer with a soft clinking sound. Looking at Millie with a calm and comforting smile, Sophia reassures her, saying, "Besides, everyone knows I'm innocent now." Sophia recalls how the brown-haired noblewoman and others spoke up in her defense, reflecting on how difficult it would have been on her own, and how grateful she is for the people who believed in her and helped. Sophia fondly remembers Louis's unwavering support when he confidently declared to the crowd that he couldn't imagine her overlooking an inspection. She also recalls him gently telling her that his brother Darius was the one causing trouble, taking the blame away from her. Sophia smiles warmly, feeling a sweet fluttering in her heart as she realizes that lately, Louis seems to have become a little kinder to her. Bringing her focus back to the present, Sophia smiles brightly at Millie and gently tells her not to worry about it anymore. Millie smiles warmly and replies, "Sure," as she holds an item. Sophia takes notes in her ledger with a quill, reflecting on how everyone enjoyed picking up the items and how the event was a huge hit, wondering which items were the first to sell out. Millie puts a hand to her chin thoughtfully and says, "Well, I think an illustration of the pretty decorative pouches and the dress with the beautiful colored embroidery that Sophia made for the bazaar." In her room, Sophia listens attentively as Millie stands before her, gesturing with her hands. Millie smiles and praises her mistress, saying, "Lady Sophia, you're always so thoughtful toward your customers, even now that the bazaar's over." Sitting on the couch with her notebook, Sophia looks up thoughtfully with a soft... Sophia remembers her past motivation, thinking about how when she was making plans to run away, the question of money was a big hurdle, and how securing a steady income is the real issue. Sophia looks down at her notebook, realizing with a sense of hope that there are indeed people who want to buy the things she makes. Looking determined, Sophia stands in her room and thinks to herself, "I want to make dressmaking my job." With a slightly nervous but hopeful look, Sophia asks, "What do you think?" Millie clasps her hands in excitement and declares, "Such a characteristically brilliant idea, Lady Sophia." Sophia smiles gently, placing her hand over her heart as she says, "Thank you." Sophia looks down at her book, realizing that since she lacks the business knowledge to sell things on her own, her path forward will involve both sewing and studying business. Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion and nausea washes over Sophia as she clutches her head and lets out a painful Millie rushes to her side in deep concern, asking, "Are you okay?" and reminding her that the doctor said her morning sickness would get worse around this time, urging her to take it easy. Covering her mouth with a pale, trembling hand, Sophia weakly replies, "Right. Sophia gently places her hand over her belly, reminding herself this child comes first, after all. Later on, the door opens with a click, and Sophia smiles warmly as she welcomes her guest, saying, "Welcome, Elliot." Elliot smiles and greets her back, "Hey, Sophia." An elegant handwritten letter from Elliot lies on the table, reading, "I'll come by next time I'm in the area on business." Elliot looks slightly confused as Sophia giggles with a cheerful heh, surrounded by a light, bubbly atmosphere. Seated on the couch, Elliot gestures warmly as he speaks, saying, "I've been hearing about the charity bazaar from all sorts of people. I couldn't make it." Elliot continues, but word is it was a huge success and the donations exceeded the goal. Sophia smiles happily and responds, "That's happy news as a participant." Elliot smiles brightly and compliments her, saying, "Especially since I hear your pieces were the most popular, Sophia." Sophia is caught by surprise, blushing slightly as she utters, "Huh?" With a small chibi illustration of Elliot saying, "Just like I said, right?" And Sophia chuckling, "Yes, thank you." Elliot looks at her warmly and says, "I think even more people would want your work. It'd be a shame to stop at just this once," before adding, "Making the items is a whole other challenge. It's tough, right?" Resting her hands on her lap, Sophia thinks to herself that since Elliot is a trader, he knows all about how business and market demand work. Facing Elliot, Sophia says, "I'm interested in selling my own work too," which prompts Elliot to respond in surprise, "Really?" Sophia explains, "The bazaar got me thinking, maybe I should earn money on my own," while quietly keeping to herself the secret that she cannot tell him about her pregnancy or plans to run away. Elliot takes a sip of his tea and smiles warmly, saying, "You're getting interested in business now, Sophia. That makes me kind of happy." Sophia sits across from Elliot in the spacious sunlit drawing room, explaining, "But I don't know anything about management, so I have no idea what I need. If it's okay, I'd love to ask for your advice on how to study it up." Elliot points a gloved finger up and eagerly recommends, "First off, I want to recommend some books that were a big help to me. My shop has them," before adding that he could lend her his own well-read copies. Sophia clasps her hands together with sparkling eyes and says, "I'd love for you to tell me about them. Mind if I visit your shop?" Elliot beams with a bright, handsome smile and readily agrees, "Of course." Sophia looks at him with appreciation and says, "That'd be a huge help, but I wouldn't want to be a bother." Elliot looks back at her with an encouraging expression, asking, "What are you talking about?" Clenching his fist with playful enthusiasm, a chibi-style Elliot confidently declares, "It'll be a good thing for me too, so hit me up." Sophia looks at him warmly, her heart touched by his kindness as she softly thinks, "Elliot." With a sweet and gentle smile, Sophia looks at Elliot and expresses her sincere gratitude, whispering, "Thank you." Elliot gazes at Sophia with a quiet, gentle, and admiring look in his eyes. Inside a teacup, Sophia's reflection smiles softly as she resolves, "I'll work hard to make sewing my job." Standing up to bid farewell, Elliot says, "It was great talking with you today," and Sophia smiles, replying, "Yes, next time I'll come visit as a customer." Suddenly, a sharp wave of dizziness hits Sophia as her vision blurs, causing her to lose her balance and gasp, "Ah," while Elliot looks on in shock as she leans heavily on the table. Elliot quickly holds Sophia to steady her, asking in concern, "You okay?" To which Sophia replies weakly, "I felt dizzy for a sec, sorry." Elliot helps Sophia sit back down on the couch, gently telling her, "Rest up properly," as Sophia smiles appreciatively and answers, "Yes, I will." Smiling warmly, Elliot waves his gloved hand and bids her goodbye, saying, "See ya." Elliot pulls the heavy double doors of the room open with a click to make his exit. As he steps out, Elliot gasps in surprise, muttering a soft, "Ah." In the hallway, Elliot stands frozen as he comes face to face with a stern-looking Duke Lewis, who stares back at him with an icy expression. Duke Lewis looks incredibly cold and menacing, his piercing blue eyes glaring in silent disapproval. Duke Lewis and Elliot face each other in the corridor outside Sophia's room, exchanging a heavy, silent gaze as Sophia watches them from a distance. Duke Lewis glares coldly and menacingly, maintaining an icy and hostile silence. A sharp, dramatic brushstroke effect cuts across the screen, highlighting the sudden shift to a tense and heavy atmosphere. Politely introducing himself, Elliot smiles and says, "Excuse me, I'm Elliot Lukes." Elliot explains the situation, saying, "The lady and I are childhood friends, so I came to visit her. But on my way out, she got dizzy, so I escorted her to her room." Lewis replies with a deeply displeased expression, "I see." Inside the beautifully decorated room, Sophia remains seated on the couch as the two men continue their tense conversation at the doorway. Sophia looks worried as she realizes that even though nothing shady happened, the atmosphere has somehow become incredibly awkward and tense. Sophia tries to defuse the situation, explaining, I only felt a little dizzy. I'm sorry for troubling you like this. Thanks for escorting me. Elliot turns to Sophia with a warm, caring smile and gently tells her, I was worried about you. Don't push yourself. Preparing to take his leave, Elliot begins walking away and politely says, please take good care of her. Elliot pauses and adds to Louis, it would help if you kept an eye on her health, too. Looking incredibly stern and hostile, Duke Louis coldly retorts, you have no right to say that to me. Keeping his composure, Elliot smiles politely and replies, you're right. Then, excuse me. Elliot bows respectfully before stepping out of the room, leaving Louis standing at the doorway with a dark expression. As he walks down the corridor, Elliot thinks to himself in concern, is it because he's the Knight Commander? He seems like a strict guy. Elliot continues to worry, wondering if the cold Duke treats Sophia with the same harshness as he walks away under Louis's silent glare. Stepping inside the room with a firm and heavy stride, Louis approaches Sophia. Looking down at Sophia, Louis harbors dark, resentful thoughts about her so-called childhood friend. Louis confronts her coldly, asking, were you that eager to meet him despite feeling unwell? Which prompts Sophia to look down and weakly reply, I just suddenly got dizzy. I was fine until just now. Louis mocks her situation, saying, your childhood friend sure is dramatic to worry that much over something like that, while Sophia nervously grips her arm in discomfort. Louis sternly warns her, if you can't even manage your health, then stay put quietly. Overwhelmed by his harsh words, Sophia bows her head and softly whispers, I'm sorry. Louis turns and walks away without another word, leaving Sophia sitting alone in the middle of the spacious, silent drawing room. Louis stops briefly near the doorway, staying silent as a heavy, uncomfortable feeling lingers between them. The heavy wooden doors shut with a loud, resounding slam, leaving Sophia alone in silence. Later on, Sophia rests in her bed as Millie enters the bright, sunlit bedroom carrying a tray. Millie approaches the bed and asks in deep concern, has the dizziness subsided? Sophia smiles gently to reassure her maid, replying, yes, I'm much better now. Resting her chin on her hand, Sophia reflects on her condition, thinking, morning sickness symptoms come in all kinds, huh? Millie sighs and thoughtfully notes, they vary from person to person, so it's quite difficult to find a solution. Holding her teacup, Sophia thoughtfully resolves that she needs to be much more careful with her health, just as Louis had said. Millie's expression tightens with frustration as she looks down, unable to contain her anger over the Duke's behavior. Millie speaks up, venting her frustration. Even if he didn't know it was morning sickness, to speak to you like that, almost as if he was blaming you, he didn't even show any signs of concern. He really is a cold person. Remembering Louis's cold demeanor, Millie clenches her hands and thinks to herself, what was that behavior about back then? Sophia looks down sadly at her teacup, whispering, yeah, I thought he'd changed a little lately, but Sophia recalls the times Louis stood up for her and supported her, remembering how he declared that he believed the incident wasn't her fault. She sighs and realizes with a heavy heart, he just did what he thought was right. Maybe it wasn't for my sake. Millie looks at her mistress and says, I've seen you faint before, Lady Sophia, and thinking you might collapse again, I'm really glad Elliot was there to support her. Sophia smiles softly and shares, actually, I consulted him about business and study methods too, and he's going to teach me. Millie clasps her hands in excitement and smiles brightly, agreeing, he's kind and reliable too. Sophia looks down with a mix of gratitude and guilt, thinking, and yet here I am troubling him. Looking at her teacup, Sophia wonders, I'd like to give you something in return as an apology, but I'm not sure what would be best. Sophia fondly remembers their childhood, when she gave Elliot a teddy bear and said, sorry for saying I hated you before. Holding her teacup with a gentle, nostalgic smile, Sophia thinks, just like that time. Meanwhile, Louis bursts into his study, slamming the double doors open with absolute frustration. His aide looks up from his desk in surprise and says, finally back? Hey, these documents. Louis stands in the middle of his study, his eyes glowing with a cold, intense blue light as he seethes in anger. Clenching his fist tightly, Louis thinks to himself in irritation, why am I so irritated? I shouldn't interfere with her actions. His aide looks at him in confusion and asks, hey, Louis, are you listening? Sitting down heavily at his desk and holding his head in frustration, Louis snaps, shut up, I can hear you. The blonde nobleman looks at Duke Louis with a nervous, sweat-dropped expression and says, what's up? You're intimidating enough already, as the Duke radiates a dark, intense aura from his desk. Duke Louis remains stony-faced and completely silent, staring off with a cold, displeased look as his irritation simmers. Sensing the tense atmosphere in the room, the blonde nobleman's sweat drops and asks, did something happen? Duke Louis looks down grumpily and admits, "For some reason, I'm extremely irritated," as the blonde nobleman sits across from him and suggests, "Well, there must be a trigger." Duke Louis rubs his forehead as he thinks back to earlier in the corridor, remembering, "When I passed by Sophia's room?" Duke Louis recalls his encounter with Sophia's childhood friend, thinking her childhood friend was coming out, prompting the blonde nobleman to react in utter confusion with a startled, "Huh?" The blonde nobleman closes his eyes with a sigh of relief, understanding the situation as he says, "I understand that he only escorted Sophia back to her room out of concern for her because she was feeling unwell. So that's it." Duke Louis rests his chin on his gloved hand and coldly tells himself, no matter who she hangs out with or what she does, it has nothing to do with me. Looking thoughtful, the blonde nobleman watches the Duke and thinks to himself, come to think of it, before. Duke Louis continues to firmly deny his feelings, looking away with a rigid expression as he thinks, we're husband and wife in name only. I have no reason to butt in. A dramatic transition frame signals a sudden realization with the words, "but now," echoing the shift in the atmosphere. The blonde nobleman points out Duke Louis's contradiction, asking, "You think that, yet you're still irritated?" Leaning forward with a playful smirk, the blonde nobleman points an accusing finger at Duke Louis and teases, "Could that be jealousy?" Duke Louis's eyes widen in sheer shock and annoyance as he lets out a quiet, flustered, "Ha." The blonde nobleman mockingly wipes a tear and dramatically swoons, crying, "I'm truly moved," which prompts an irritated Duke Louis to snap back, "No way, that's it. Don't spout nonsense," leaving his companion to whine, "Ah." Duke Louis falls completely silent, resting his chin on his gloved hand with a deeply troubled and brooding expression as his partner stands beside him. Surrounded by a warm, glowing background of golden flowers, Duke Louis gazes off thoughtfully, unable to shake the unsettling feeling of jealousy taking root in his heart. The title card marks the beginning of a new chapter of Sophia's journey as she prepares to take control of her own destiny. Under a bright, sunny sky, an elegant horse-drawn carriage travels smoothly down a bustling cobblestone city street. Sophia peers out of the carriage window, wearing a lovely, wide-brimmed white hat as she happily wonders, I wonder what Elliot's shop is like. Resting her chin in her hand, Sophia ponders deeply, thinking, but I have to properly look for a return gift too. I agonized over what would be good, but Sophia remembers Elliot's bright, friendly smile as he eagerly recommended books to her, telling her, I've reread it so many times that it's all worn out though. Inspired by his words, Sophia decides on making a beautiful book cover as a gift, thinking, and a cover-like shape seemed the easiest to use, but she smiles gently, realizing the practical challenges as she thinks, if it doesn't match the book's size, it can't be used. Sophia's thoughts drift to her family heritage, remembering how her mother used to dedicate her heart to her craft, thinking, mother as well thought of new products for customers. She warmly recalls the bustling family shop from her childhood, thinking about how there were always lots of regular customers who loved her mother's work. Looking back on her mother's warm smile and dedication, Sophia remembers how happy the atmosphere always was, thinking, even as a child. Sophia remembers her gentle father standing beside her when she was a little girl, thinking, father too. She recalls the deep bond between her parents, remembering how much her father adored her mother, thinking, loved mother. In a bittersweet memory, a young Sophia smiles radiantly alongside her loving mother and father in a happy family portrait. The heavy shadows of grief fall over the scene as Sophia remembers her mother's funeral, thinking, ever since that day. She remembers crying bitterly as a child beside her grieving, stone-faced father, thinking, I haven't seen him smiling anymore, but Sophia sits quietly in the carriage, her eyes filled with gentle determination as she wonders, if only I could become like mother, would he acknowledge me, even just a little? Sophia arrives at her destination and steps out of the carriage to find Elliot standing outside his lovely shop, waving warmly to greet her. Elliot welcomes her with a bright, handsome smile, raising his hand as he says, Sophia, welcome. Sophia smiles back warmly and says, thanks for making time for me today. To which Elliot kindly replies, not at all. Elliot looks slightly sheepish and worried, asking with concern, were things okay after I went home? I was worried that maybe I caused a misunderstanding and upset you. Sophia looks at him with a soft expression, realizing he's worried about Duke Louis's cold and menacing attitude from earlier. Sophia quickly reassures him with a bright smile, saying, it's fine, Louis was always just a quiet man to begin with, so don't worry about it. But behind her cheerful smile, Sophia feels a pang of sadness as she looks down and admits to herself, but ever since then, things have felt awkward somehow. Sophia recalls the painful reality of her relationship with Louis, remembering how coldly they walked past each other in the silent mansion like strangers. Looking down at her steps as she walks, Sophia sadly wonders if they will ever be able to go back to how they were before. Walking beside her, Elliot notices her gentle, quiet demeanor and thinks to himself, knowing Sophia, she's probably being considerate. Elliot remembers her selflessness from their childhood, recalling how she always hid her own pain to keep others happy, thinking she doesn't want to worry anyone. She hasn't changed at all. He clenches his fist with quiet resolve, wishing he could ease her burden as he thinks, there's little I can do to help, but putting on a bright, encouraging smile, Elliot looks at Sophia and warmly replies, I see. I'm glad to hear that. Elliot walks alongside Sophia and thoughtfully suggests, I don't think there'll be any misunderstandings if Millie is with you, so come together. Sophia's eyes sparkle with pure joy and relief as she clasps her hand to her chest, exclaiming, Really? Thank you, I'm happy. Elliot guides Sophia toward the shop's door and asks, How about the next shop's regular closing day? To which Sophia happily agrees, Yes, let's do it that day. Sophia smiles sweetly, her heart fluttering with excitement and hope, as she thinks, I'll have to prepare in advance by then. Elliot smiles warmly at Sophia, looking down at her with a gentle, friendly expression as she stands next to him. Elliot grabs the handle of his shop door, happily saying, All right, as he prepares to open it. Elliot opens the door and gestures inside, inviting her in by saying, Please do, while a cute chibi Sophia looks up with sparkling eyes. An overhead view of the elegant counter in Elliot's shop, where several beautiful leather-bound books are neatly displayed for Sophia to look at. Elliot points to the books on the counter, explaining, The ones I used a lot were around here, while Sophia listens attentively, holding her hand to her chest. Sophia holds up a book and asks, Is this pretty much the size of all the books you read, Elliot? Just these two sizes? To which Elliot puts a hand to his chin and replies, Yeah, more or less. Sometimes there are bigger ones too, but those are usually put away. Sophia looks surprised and quickly says, No, when Elliot asks her a question, with cute, bewildered rabbit graphics appearing around them. Elliot smiles and holds up two books, recommending, For specialized terms and such, I think it's convenient to have this book too. Sophia opens a book and notices many handwritten notes inside, saying, You really wrote a lot in it yourself, didn't you, Elliot? To which Elliot blushes slightly and rubs his neck, admitting, It was easier to understand if I took notes. Sophia shuts the book with a soft click and says with determination, I really want to learn in my own way too. She looks up with a bright, hopeful smile and declares, So I'll buy copies for myself. Elliot looks at her warmly and smiles, agreeing, Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Elliot walks over to a tall, well-stocked bookshelf with Sophia and points, saying, These two books are on this shelf, I think. Handing her one of the books, Elliot tells Sophia, This one's lower down, so could you look for it? To which she happily replies, Got it. While Elliot reaches up to a high shelf, Sophia kneels down to search the lower shelves, and Elliot smiles to himself as he says, Here it is. Elliot turns around and says, I found it, Sophia, as Sophia looks up from her knees, holding another book and responding, I found this one too. Elliot looks down at Sophia with a soft, affectionate smile, thinking to himself, That's great. Sophia stands up, stepping closer to Elliot as she clutches her book. Sophia is standing very close to Elliot, looking directly up at him. Elliot freezes, staring down at her with wide eyes as the distance between them suddenly shrinks. Sophia gazes up at Elliot with a sweet, innocent smile and asks, These are the right ones, aren't they? Flustered by her proximity, Elliot's heart beats rapidly with a loud thump as he blushes deeply and looks at her in surprise. Trying to compose himself, Elliot looks down with a sweat drop and stammers, Yeah, they're right. Holding the book close to her face, Sophia smiles happily and remarks, They smell like new books. As Sophia smiles warmly at the book, Elliot looks at her with a slightly melancholic expression, thinking, just like before. Elliot looks down, startled by his own racing heart, and mentally asks himself, What am I even thinking? Overwhelmed by his feelings, Elliot tries to remind himself, Sophia is like family to me. Looking at the glinting wedding ring on Sophia's finger as she holds a book, Elliot firmly tells himself, and above all, she's married. Standing side by side in front of the tall bookshelf, a subtle, bittersweet distance remains between Elliot and Sophia as they look at the books. Meanwhile, back in the Duke's office, an aide reports to Duke Louis, regarding Lord Elliot Lukes, it has been confirmed that Lady Sophia has been his friend since childhood, and he's the same person she was seen meeting in town before the engagement. The aide continues, It seems they happened to reunite after he finished studying abroad. He currently owns a shop as a merchant trader. Duke Lewis listens silently, his face shadowed as his gloved fingers twitch upon hearing, "And Lady Sophia did visit that shop today." Duke Lewis looks up with cold, piercing blue eyes and mutters, "Sophia went to the shop?" To which his aide nervously responds, "Yes, it was for shopping and she left after about an hour." The aide recalls seeing Elliot warmly escorting Sophia out of his lovely shop earlier that day. Standing before the Duke's desk, the aide bows his head and asks, "Shall we conduct further investigations?" A brief flashback shows the blonde nobleman pointing at Duke Lewis and teasingly asking, "Could it be that you're jealous?" The aide stands in silence, sweating nervously as he waits for a response and murmurs, Duke Lewis suddenly slams his clenched, gloved fist onto his desk with an angry thud. Startled by the loud sound, the aide gasps in fright, letting out a sudden hiccup as he trembles before the Duke's dark aura. Glaring down with a dark, brooding expression, Duke Lewis coldly commands, "No further investigation is needed," prompting his terrified aide to bow and say, "Understood, then I will take my leave." Alone in his office, Duke Lewis rests his head in his gloved hand, trying to convince himself, "It's not like there's any need for me to worry." Later, Sophia gently opens a leather-bound book cover at a table. Sophia lets out a soft sigh, saying, "Phew," as she lays the open book flat on the table before her. Closing the book with a soft pat, Sophia sits back elegantly in her chair and decides, "I'll stop here for today." Millie gently sets down a cup of tea for Sophia with a quiet clink of the porcelain. Sophia looks up as Millie smiles brightly and says, "I want to go over everything at least once before the study group." Millie enthusiastically declares, "You must be tired. Let me give you a massage tonight," as a cute chibi version of Millie pumps her fist in excitement. Admiring Sophia's book, Millie smiles warmly and says, "This book cover is lovely. It can also hide what book you're reading." Sophia smiles gently and explains, "Yes, I tried using the sample I made and it was just right," adding quietly, "So my studying won't be found out." Looking at the book cover on the table, Sophia thinks, "But it's a bit stiff. It makes it hard to read. Maybe next time I should try a thinner fabric." Sophia takes a sip of her tea, smiling contentedly as she thinks to herself, "It feels nice against the skin, though." Sophia sits at her desk with Millie standing nearby, thoughtfully telling herself, "True, maybe if I adjust the size, it'll work somehow." Holding a piece of green fabric and a needle, Sophia stares down at her work in deep thought, murmuring, Millie looks on with curiosity from behind Sophia's chair, softly asking, "Then?" Startled by a sudden sound, Sophia looks up with wide, surprised eyes, asking, "Yes?" Millie looks back toward the door in astonishment, holding her tray close to her chest as she nervously says, "It's me." Sophia quickly pulls her green fabric over her books to hide what she was doing. Duke Lewis stands in the doorway, prompting Sophia to think in surprise, "Did something happen? We haven't even seen each other's faces ever since that day, and now he suddenly comes to my room." Sophia stands up to face Duke Lewis as he stands quietly in her doorway. Surprised by his sudden presence, Sophia turns her head slightly in confusion and gasps, Duke Lewis looks at her with a serious and direct gaze, gently stating, "I'm asking if you're all right." A cute chibi Sophia stands completely bewildered with question marks floating all around her head. Duke Lewis looks down at her steps and asks, "You haven't been leaving your room much, have you?" Sophia gazes up at him with wide, hopeful eyes, softly asking, "Are you worried about me?" Duke Lewis looks down in silence as he thinks to himself, "I tried to avoid running into her, but my feelings never really settled. That look on her face keeps flashing in my mind." He continues to look at her, thinking, "And I can't concentrate, so I came to check on her." Before asking, "You still haven't recovered since then?" Sophia quickly reassures him, "No, that day I was just sleep deprived. I'm fine now." Sophia smiles closed-eyed and contentedly, keeping her hands on her chest as she thinks to herself, "He's never cared about my condition before. Anyway, I have to make sure he doesn't notice it's morning sickness." Looking back at Duke Lewis, Sophia happily mentions, "I'm planning to meet Brenda tomorrow. I've invited her." Duke Lewis looks slightly confused and asks, "But why are you always in your room?" He looks past her at the desk, questioning her, "Don't tell me you've been sewing this whole time?" Millie blushes nervously and confirms, "Yes." Duke Lewis points out, "But the bazaar is already over, isn't it?" To which Sophia nervously replies, "That's true, but..." Looking up at him with determination, Sophia explains, "I want to make something new using the experience I gained from the bazaar." Duke Lewis looks at her with a gentle, focused gaze, his piercing blue eyes showing his quiet interest. Staring down at her warmly, Duke Lewis tells her, "You're someone who can live up to those expectations." Surprised by his unexpected encouragement, Sophia's eyes widen as she softly gasps, "Ah." Feeling flustered and embarrassed by his compliment, Sophia quickly stammers, "Nothing." Looking to the side with a sweet blush on her cheeks, Sophia happily thinks to herself, I never imagined. Smiling warmly with her hands clasped to her chest, Sophia looks incredibly happy amidst beautiful blooming roses. With a bright, joyful expression, she says, I'll do my best. Thank you very much. Duke Louis looks down at her with a soft, affectionate expression. Turning away slightly, Duke Louis bids her farewell by saying, well then. Duke Louis walks away down the long, sunlit palace corridor, his footsteps echoing softly. As he walks, Duke Louis sighs and thinks to himself, I thought that once I checked on her, I would stop feeling bothered. In a beautifully decorated parlor, Sophia and Brenda sit on elegant couches having tea, as Brenda sighs and says, Thanks to you, I've gotten the hang of it more than before, but it still takes so much time. Sophia listens attentively while holding her green sewing fabric and needle. Sophia smiles warmly at Brenda's progress and says, Is that so? Thank you. Brenda leans forward with interest and asks, So, what are you making?
Sophia proudly holds up her green fabric and explains with a bright smile, I was thinking about making a cover for books.
A chibi Brenda gasps in amazement from across the couch, exclaiming, What? You made it yourself? That's incredible. Meanwhile, Duke Louis walks down the grand hallway, thinking to himself, I didn't know Sophia was close enough with the Duchess of Elms to invite her. He looks down at his steps, deciding, perhaps I should at least offer my greetings, as her husband. Looking at his reflection in the glass, Duke Louis reflects, I've never paid much attention to social connections until now, but perhaps I should show a bit more concern, for the sake of the family at least. Duke Louis approaches the large wooden doors of the parlor where Sophia and Brenda are gathered. Before opening the door, he pauses as he overhears Brenda's voice from inside saying, You've made so many samples for a gift. Hearing this, Duke Louis wonders, a gift? Duke Louis's hand freezes on the door handle as Brenda's enthusiastic voice from inside exclaims, Lord Luke's will definitely be delighted. Duke Louis's face completely shadows over, his blue eyes cold and filled with a sudden pang of jealousy and hurt. Standing frozen outside the door, Duke Louis listens as Sophia's voice sadly admits, I just can't seem to make something I'm completely satisfied with. Dejected and heartbroken, Duke Louis slowly pulls his hand away from the door and walks back down the hallway in despondent silence. The elegant title card displays the story's name, Pregnant and Gone in 5 months. Back in the parlor, Brenda admires the green fabric, encouraging her by saying, It already looks like a wonderful item, though. Sophia holds up the green fabric book cover and thoughtfully remarks, Maybe it would be easier to use if the fabric fits it a little more closely. A chibi version of Sophia looks down pensively, agreeing, You're right, I'll try it with another fabric. In the beautifully decorated parlor, Sophia and Brenda sit opposite each other on elegant couches, enjoying tea. Brenda holds her sewing hoop and casually asks, By the way, how have things been with Lord Chamberlain lately? I heard he's a man of few words. Sophia looks up thoughtfully and gently replies, Well, Louis is a busy man. Sophia smiles warmly as she continues, We still don't talk that much, but compared to before, I think he's become easier to talk to.
Brenda smiles brightly, pleased by the progress in their relationship, and says, That's good.
Sophia chuckles softly, blushing as she confesses, Yes, honestly, I was surprised. Sophia fondly recalls how Duke Louis recently came to her room to check on her, asking, I wanted to know if you're all right, and warmly encouraging her. I'm sure you can live up to the expectations. Standing among beautiful yellow flowers, Sophia smiles sweetly and thinks, Maybe? Brenda enthusiastically talks about her plans, prompting Sophia to ask, How about you, Brenda? You're going to the theater with your husband? That's lovely. To which Brenda replies, Yes, but suddenly my husband said he wants to watch something different. Later, Sophia and Millie arrive at Elliot's merchant shop, where Sophia bows politely as Elliot says, Thank you for today, and warmly adds, Oh, come on, don't be so formal. Elliot smiles cheerfully and brightly, surrounded by a warm, welcoming aura. A chibi version of Sophia looks surprised and thinks, But you're my teacher after all. Millie smiles happily as she stands behind Sophia inside Elliot's charming shop. Millie bows deeply and says, I will be waiting outside. Please take good care of Lady Sophia. Elliot places a hand on his chest and reassures Millie with a bright smile, saying, You can count on me. Sophia reaches into her bag to pull out a beautifully wrapped gift box, saying, Before we start studying, Sophia holds out the white gift box with the green ribbon and says, So I made this as both an apology and a thank you for this time as well. Elliot takes the box, pleasantly surprised, and says, You didn't have to worry about that, but thank you. Can I open it? Elliot opens the gift box to find 2 beautifully crafted book covers, questioning in wonder, What is? Sophia gestures with her hand as she explains, "It's a cover you put on books. I thought it might help them not get damaged so easily." Elliot looks up at her in surprise, asking, "You came up with this?" And Sophia happily responds, "Yes." Elliot smiles with pure joy and sparkling eyes, explaining, "I carry books around so they get dirty easily." Elliot places the green cover onto one of his books, saying, "With this, I won't have to worry anymore." Elliot beams with happiness as he proudly holds up the newly covered book. Sophia smiles warmly, blushing slightly as she says, "I'm glad you like it." Standing side by side in the sunlit study, Elliot admires Sophia's thoughtfulness, thinking she's as diligent and considerate of others as ever. Elliot gazes down at the book cover with a soft, affectionate look in his eyes. Looking at the book in the gift box, Elliot thinks to himself, "Making a book cover, what a great idea. That's just like you, Sophia. You've always treasured your belongings since long ago." Sophia smiles gently and says, "I thought it would be nice if books could stay clean and readable for a long time." Elliot holds his gloved hand to his mouth, explaining, "But there are actually quite a lot of people who don't worry about their books getting damaged, so the general demand is still unknown." To which Sophia agrees, "That's true. It's a product that hasn't existed until now." Elliot raises his finger and encouragingly points out, "But sometimes something new suddenly sells all at once. I thought it was really convenient." Adding, "When doing business, having a good eye for things is important." Sophia looks at Elliot in silent admiration, her face lit with appreciation and a soft blush. Surrounded by yellow blossoms, Sophia and Elliot stand facing each other, sharing a quiet, warm connection. Elliot smiles warmly and says, "All right then, let's start the study session for that goal." And Sophia happily replies, "Yes, please." Waving from a shop entrance, Elliot tells them, "If there's anything you don't understand again, feel free to ask any time." And Sophia answers, "Thank you." Outside on the cobblestone path, Sophia and Millie wave goodbye to Elliot as they make their way back. Walking back together, Millie happily exclaims, "Studying ahead with books help too, as expected of Lord Elliot." Sophia smiles sweetly and thinks to herself, "Elliot really helps me so much." Sophia recalls Elliot's joyful reaction to her gift, thinking, "I'm glad I was able to give him the gift. I was happy that he liked it." As Elliot's happy voice echoes, "Thank you, Sophia." Looking elegant in the afternoon sun, Sophia feels accomplished, thinking, "And that I even got his feedback. It also became a lesson for business." As she continues down the sunlit street, Sophia suddenly remembers something, thinking, "Oh, right." Sophia walks gracefully down the street surrounded by blooming white flowers, with Millie following close behind. Under the dark night sky in the palace courtyard, Duke Louis vigorously practices his swordsmanship, panting. Covered in sweat, Duke Louis pauses and takes a deep breath, sighing, "Ah." A dark aura surrounds Duke Louis as he bitterly remembers his aide's report. She has gone to Lord Luke's shop again today. Filled with frustration and jealousy, Duke Louis fiercely swings his sword, cutting through the night air. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Duke Louis tries to convince himself it shouldn't matter. Looking up at the dark sky, Duke Louis thinks sadly, wherever Sophia goes, whatever she does. Sophia looks back warmly at her memories of Duke Louis, holding her hands to her chest with a bright smile as she remembers her promise. "And yet, I'll do my best. Thank you." Covered in sweat, Duke Louis grips his sword tightly, breathing heavily as he reflects in frustration. A transitional panel features a peaceful white background adorned with elegant pale blue floral designs on the right side. Under a bright sunny blue sky filled with fluffy white clouds, a wooden sign that reads "Craft Store" hangs outside a charming building. Inside the craft store, Sophia's maid holds a list and says, "I'll go and get the things we were running low on." To which Sophia warmly replies, "Please do." Sophia stands before a massive wooden cabinet stocked with neatly organized craft supplies. She thinks to herself, "It would serve as a thank you for the help I received, and I wanted to make something for Louis too." Looking thoughtfully at the shelves, Sophia places her hand on her chin and wonders, "I wonder what would be good." Sophia's eye sparkles with excitement as she notices something special on one of the shelves. She spots a beautiful teal-colored reel of thread shining brightly among the others, thinking, "This color? It looks just like the color of Louis's eyes." Holding the teal spool of thread with a gentle smile, Sophia thinks, "It would probably look good on him. I'll use this as the main color for the embroidery." And looking at the shelves of supplies, Sophia thoughtfully remembers, "Come to think of it, shortly after we were married." Sophia fondly recalls the time she happily embroidered a blue handkerchief, thinking, "I embroidered a handkerchief, thinking it might give us a chance to talk, even just a little." She remembers how she tried to give it to him, only for Duke Louis to coldly dismiss her, saying, "I'm busy, so do it later," leaving her feeling rejected and hurt. Back in the present, Sophia gazes sadly at the teal thread in her hand, questioning herself. If I make it, will that just happen again? She recalls Duke Lewis's recent warm and encouraging words when he told her, "I am sure you can meet those expectations." Shaking her head vigorously in a cute chibi style, Sophia tries to clear away her doubts and fears. With a determined look and surrounded by beautiful yellow blossoms, Sophia holds the teal thread and decides, "I'm sure I can give it to him this time." As the sun sets outside the Grand Mansion corridor, Sophia makes her way back while her maid walks ahead carrying the shopping bag. Suddenly, Sophia turns around in surprise as she hears the sound of a nearby door clicking open. Duke Lewis enters through the grand double doors, looking exhausted and weary in his elaborate military uniform and dark cape. Sophia greets him warmly with a smile, saying, "Lewis, you've only just returned, haven't you?" Looking tired and sweat-worn, Duke Lewis glances down and quietly replies, "Yeah." Seeing his exhausted state, Sophia says with concern, "You must be tired. I'm sorry." Duke Lewis looks at her sideways with a cold, suspicious gaze. Duke Lewis asks, "Were you out as well?" And Sophia gently replies, "Yes, I went to the tailor shop for some shopping." At the mention of the tailor shop, Duke Lewis immediately clenches his claw, a dark, jealous shadow casting over his face. Filled with jealousy and bitterness, Duke Lewis's cold thoughts demand, "Are you making something for that childhood friend of yours again?" Sophia looks up at him, her face filled with confusion and surprise as she stammers, "Huh?" In a dark, menacing tone, Duke Lewis asks, "There's no longer any need for sewing, is there?" Looking at her coldly, Duke Lewis says, "To spend so much of your time on something so useless? I am simply appalled," leaving Sophia frozen in shock as she gasps, Duke Lewis turns on his heel, his heavy boots clicking on the floor as he prepares to walk away. Duke Lewis walks past her down the sunlit palace corridor, leaving Sophia standing completely frozen in heartbroken silence. Sophia looks back at his retreating figure with tears in her eyes, crying out in her mind, "Is that how you really felt?" With tears streaming down her face, Sophia confronts him, asking, "When I told you I wanted to make use of my experience with the bazaar, were you appalled that I was doing something so useless?" Stunned by her sudden emotional outburst, Duke Lewis looks back over his shoulder, sweating as he defensively mutters, "That's not—" Sophia looks down in deep sorrow, her tears falling as she cries, "I don't understand you at all, Lewis." As Duke Lewis stares at her in shock, Sophia trembles with hurt and says, "Because of you, Duke Lewis reacts defensively with anger, his voice booming, "Because of me? What exactly is my fault?" Looking up at him with tear-filled eyes, Sophia pleads, "If you have something to say, please just say it." Refusing to share his feelings, Duke Lewis averts his gaze and mutters coldly, "Forget it." Sophia casts her eyes down, her face hidden by the shadow of her hat, and says quietly, "If that's what you're going to say, then I won't say anything more either." Duke Lewis walks away down the hallway, leaving Sophia standing alone in desolation as his footsteps echo through the empty corridor. A split panel shows Sophia crying silently into her hand while Duke Lewis walks away, his expression filled with regret and inner turmoil. Sitting alone at her grand desk in her room, Sophia sighs in regret, thinking, "Maybe I shouldn't have talked back like that." Bursting into tears at her desk under the dark night sky, Sophia thinks, "But Lewis went too far. I was so happy because I thought he was finally acknowledging me. How could he say such things?" Wiping her tears, Sophia resolves to stay strong and reaches for a book on her desk, thinking, "Well, there's no use being depressed. That really would be a waste of time." Meanwhile, in Duke Lewis's office, his blonde aide looks nervously at some paperwork while Duke Lewis sits in gloomy silence. The blonde aide sighs and says, "Now that's a rare occurrence, for you to get into a fight." With a frustrated expression, Duke Lewis grumbles, "It's not that big of a deal." The blonde aide points a finger in disbelief and tells him, "What are you talking about? Other people might be scared of you and avoid you, but you never get into actual verbal arguments, though we used to fight when we were kids." In a childhood flashback, the young blonde boy angrily points a finger and lectures young Lewis, who silently holds his practiced wooden sword. The adult blonde aide raises his hands with a sheepish smile, explaining, "Even then, it was mostly just me getting worked up." In the childhood memory, the blonde boy looks downcast and says, "I'll forgive you already. I'd said too much myself." To which young Lewis simply replies, "I see." Standing in his office with crossed arms, Duke Lewis reflects with a sigh, thinking, was that how it was? Getting irritated at someone like this and snapping at them? This might be the first time. Looking deeply troubled, Duke Lewis closes his eyes in regret and wonders, why did I say those things to her? The blonde aide stands with a confident, knowing smile on his face. Duke Lewis looks back with an irritated and exhausted expression, asking, "What is it?" The blonde aide suddenly leans over Duke Lewis's shoulder with a playful grin, saying, "Hey, Lewis." The blonde aide's cheerful demeanor shifts to a serious look of concern as he notices Duke Lewis's unusually downcast state. Letting out a heavy sigh, the blonde aide says, "I don't particularly," before thinking, "Judging by that look, you've never apologized once, have you?" And adding, "I've had my doubts about your attitude up until now too, you know." Standing firmly before Duke Lewis, the blonde aide advises him, "You should be the one to apologize properly." Duke Lewis stares in shock as the aide's chibi head emphatically adds, "and as soon as possible," causing Lewis to swallow hard. Duke Lewis looks downcast and stubborn, muttering to himself, "Why should I be the one?" Sophia walks down the Grand Palace staircase, her soft footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. Duke Lewis stands alone in the corridor, looking solemn and lost in his thoughts. As Sophia walks past him, they briefly lock eyes before she cold shoulders him, turning away with a swift movement. Lewis stands silently, watching Sophia's retreating figure as she walks away down the long corridor. Looking sad and holding her hand to her chest, Sophia wonders to herself, "I wonder if it's all right to leave things like this." Sophia gazes downward with a look of quiet resignation, thinking, "I'm planning on leaving the house anyway." As Sophia continues to walk away, she steels herself with the thought, besides, Lewis is the one in the wrong. Duke Lewis glances back over his shoulder with a heavy, regretful heart, watching her walk away. Duke Lewis stands in front of the grand closed doors, appearing completely isolated and full of remorse. Nearby, two maids sweep the floor and whisper among themselves, "I wonder what the Lord is thinking." Conversing in hushed tones, one maid says, "These past few days, he's often been standing there in front of Madame's room." The maids are suddenly startled to find Duke Lewis standing nearby and quickly scurry away in fear. Left alone in the quiet corridor, Duke Lewis lets out a deep, troubled sigh. The grand double doors click open, and Sophia steps out, looking lovely in a light blue gown. Stumbling upon one another, Sophia gasps in surprise, "Ah!" as Lewis stares at her in stunned silence. Sophia looks at him with a mix of surprise, hesitation, and lingering sadness in her violet eyes. Sophia politely curtsies to maintain a formal and distant relationship with him. As Sophia starts to walk away, Duke Lewis calls out in a panic, "Wait," causing her to halt in surprise. Duke Lewis stands frozen, sweating nervously as he struggles to find the right words. Sophia turns around, wondering, and thinking to herself, "Should I say something?" Clutching her dress tightly, Sophia firmly decides, "No, I'm done walking on eggshells." Walking away, Sophia tells him coldly, "If you don't need anything, please excuse me." Duke Lewis is stunned by her coldness and asks in disbelief, "What did you say?" causing Sophia to turn back. Standing some distance apart in the wide corridor, Sophia prepares to explain her stance, thinking, "I don't think." Duke Lewis looks down with a deeply repentant and vulnerable expression, surrounded by delicate blue forget-me-nots. Sophia demands, "Then why did you say that?" leaving Duke Lewis sweating as he mutters, "I don't know why myself, but..." Blushing and sweating slightly, Duke Lewis raises his hand to his mouth and says, "Anyway, I didn't mean it." Sophia is completely taken aback, thinking in amazement, "This is my first time seeing Lewis make a face like that." Sophia closes her eyes for a brief moment, letting go of the anger and tension she had been holding on to. Bowing her head slightly, Sophia softly says, "I'm sorry." With a warm and gentle smile, Sophia looks up at him and offers, "For not greeting you, how about we call it even?" A rare, genuine smile appears on Duke Lewis's face as he happily replies, "Yeah." Smiling sweetly, Sophia giggles and admits, "To be honest, I didn't think I'd receive an apology from you." Feeling a bit flustered and proud, Duke Lewis clenches his fist and retorts, "That depends on the time and situation." Duke Lewis recalls his stubbornness in his office, bitterly asking, "Why should I?" He remembers the blonde aide pointing an accusing finger at him and lecturing, "What do you mean, why? You know you're the one in the wrong, don't you? If you have even the slightest bit of affection for your wife, you should apologize for hurting her." Reaching his limit under the aide's nagging, Duke Lewis finally relented, grumbling, "Fine," while the aide's chibi head gleefully cheered, "You'd better do so." Handing over 2 exhibition tickets, the blonde aide says, "That's right, since you've made up, take this." Duke Lewis holds a beautifully designed ticket labeled Exhibition, ready to show it to his wife. Sophia looks up at him with a startled and curious expression, asking, "What is it?" Standing together by the sunlit window of the corridor, Lewis explains, "Apparently an acquaintance of hers is running it. They're aiming for an exhibition that people of all ages and genders can visit. Looking slightly embarrassed, Duke Lewis averts his gaze and adds, "It seems they need a woman's perspective as well." Sophia holds the ticket with a surprised expression, wondering to herself, "Me?" Lewis gestures with a gentle explanation, saying, "Since it's centered around art, there might be things that relate to sewing. What do you think?" Sophia's heart flutters with excitement as she realizes going to an exhibition with Lewis. Looking down at the ticket in her hand, Sophia happily considers, "And it seems like it would be a good learning experience too. My morning sickness has settled down quite a bit too." Smiling warmly and holding the ticket close, Sophia looks up at him and says, "I'd like to go as well." Duke Lewis looks at her with a gentle, softened expression, a slight blush warming his cheeks at her happy response. As the warm evening sun sets through the trees, the topic turns to their upcoming outing. Resting under the shade of a large tree during a break from horseback riding, Duke Lewis tells his blonde aide, "I'm going with Sophia," to which the aide cheerfully responds, "I see." Leaning in with a playful and knowing smile, the blonde aide teases him, "Well, yeah." The blonde aide slaps Duke Lewis heartily on the back, cheering, "That's a relief. I'm glad for you, Lewis," while Lewis grumpily mutters, "Quiet." Standing up to end the conversation, Duke Lewis walks towards their horses and says, "I'm heading back now," leaving the aide to simply reply, "Oh." The group of knights gallop swiftly down the forest path on their brown horses, kicking up leaves under the bright sunlight. Riding behind Lewis, the blonde aide watches him thoughtfully, reflecting, seeing how Lewis actually apologized on his own. Looking at Duke Lewis's broad back as he rides, the aide continues to think, he must be that interested in his wife. He's a guy who never used to get jealous. Smiling warmly, the blonde aide continues his inner monologue, thinking it isn't that he lacks interest in others. He ponders deeply on Duke Lewis's nature, concluding, it's more like he's made a conscious effort not to have any. In a childhood memory, several young boys play happily with a ball in a grassy park, while a young Lewis trains alone with a wooden sword in the background. The young blonde boy pauses his game to watch young Lewis swing his heavy wooden sword with absolute dedication and exhaustion. Waving his hand cheerfully, the young blonde boy calls out, "Play with us too, Lewis." Wiping the sweat from his face, young Lewis declines the offer, quietly muttering, "I'm fine." The young blonde boy watches him with a mixture of concern and sadness, thinking since he was a child he was expected to be number one. Standing proudly in his military uniform as an adult, Duke Lewis represents the peak of strength and expectation, though the aide notes, and in fact, Lewis became the strongest man. But looking at Duke Lewis's solitary figure walking away into a dark void, the aide remembers his deep concerns. "I was worried that a crack would appear someday. I had my concerns." Shouting directions on horseback, Duke Lewis commands his men, showing a side of himself that is changing, as the aide thinks, but thanks to his wife, he's starting to change little by little. The blonde aide smiles warmly as he rides, thinking, though he doesn't seem to realize it himself. Recalling Sophia's gentle presence, the blonde aide muses, that wife of his, I thought she was a reserved person. Looking thoughtful as he rides, the aide wonders, based on Lewis' stories until now. Sophia stands gracefully by the tall window of her sunlit room, lost in her thoughts as the aide wonders, did something happen to change her? Standing in the warm light of her room, Sophia gently rests her hand on her stomach, thinking of her unborn child. The scene transitions to a beautiful, clear blue sky decorated with soft white clouds and green summer leaves. The grand exterior of the imperial palace is bathed in warm, radiant sunlight. Inside the majestic and glittering exhibition hall, elegant nobles gather to admire the various art pieces on display. Sophia and Lewis arrive together at the venue, with Sophia looking absolutely stunning in a white gown printed with blue roses and a matching wide-brimmed hat as Lewis walks elegantly beside her. Looking up at him with a sweet smile, Sophia happily agrees, yes. The couple walks through the grand hall, standing out beautifully as they stop to admire a display in the center of the room. Duke Lewis glances at Sophia out of the corner of his eye, observing her closely and thoughtfully. Nearby, a lady affectionately links arms with a gentleman wearing a fine patterned coat. Staring at the couple, Duke Lewis looks surprised and wonders in his mind, is that how it is? Sophia? Sophia focuses intently on the exhibits, eagerly writing down her observations and thoughts in her small notepad. Looking at her focused state, Duke Lewis folds his arms and decides, maybe I should just go with it. Kate's been nagging me about it anyway. He recalls the chibi version of his blonde aide, Kate, giving a thumbs up and enthusiastically advising, let's hear what you think, don't hold back. Sophia looks up in surprise, holding her pen to her notebook as if ready to listen to his thoughts. Looking closely at Duke Lewis, Sophia notices his contemplative expression and thinks it seems like he has a surprising interest in works of art. Standing together before an elaborate glass display containing an ornate golden vase, Sophia asks, "It's an unusual shape, but it's lovely, right?" To which Lewis replies, "Not bad." Holding his chin thoughtfully, Duke Lewis examines the vase and says, "I thought it was a work by a seasoned artist, but it's by a young artist?" Sophia looks at the exhibits, wondering to herself, is this someone getting attention at the exhibition? As Duke Lewis stands beside her and notes, there are plenty more. Admiring the fine artwork displayed on the walls, Sophia and Lewis stand side by side, quietly observing a painting in the crowded gallery. Holding her notepad and pen close, Sophia looks up at Duke Lewis with a warm, gentle smile as they stand surrounded by delicate blue flowers. The quiet click of their shoes echoes through the grand gallery as the couple continues their peaceful stroll together. In the distance, a small, dark-haired boy in yellow shorts stands alone by a golden pedestal, rubbing his tear-filled eyes and crying quietly. Sophia stops in her tracks, looking at the child with a mixture of concern and hesitation as she asks, "Is that child lost?" Duke Lewis looks on with a cold, stern expression, thinking to himself, crying here of all places? He should have learned how to maintain proper manners. Lewis mutters dismissively, "It's someone else's kid, best to stay out of it." But Sophia firmly responds, "I can't just do that," and immediately walks toward the child. Before she can take another step, Lewis reaches out and firmly grabs her wrist to stop her from interfering. Sophia stops and looks back at him in sheer disbelief, asking why. Looking at her with a serious and uncompromising gaze, Lewis explains his strict worldview. Spoiling a child will turn him into a weakling. Gently but resolutely pulling her hand out of his firm grasp, Sophia replies, "That's not true." Sophia looks directly into his eyes with a gentle but unwavering expression and corrects him, saying, "Spoiling and protecting are two different things." Duke Lewis stands completely speechless, deeply stunned as Sophia's perspective challenges his long-held beliefs. Leaving Lewis behind, Sophia walks gracefully toward the weeping child with a gentle rustle of her dress. Sophia kneels down to eye level with the young boy, offering him a warm, reassuring smile to soothe his tears. Standing some distance away, Duke Lewis watches his wife comfort the child, his expression filled with complex, quiet thoughts. Lewis stands conflicted, his mind racing as he reflects, protecting? But being strict is what shows love for a child. Staring down at his empty hand, Duke Lewis is left to wonder in confusion. If that's not the case, then... Near the exit, the lost boy is safely reunited with his worried parents, who tearfully embrace him with immense relief. Sophia clasps her hands together in pure joy, incredibly relieved and happy to see the young boy reunited with his family. Duke Lewis stands off to the side, keeping his distance and turning his back as he continues to ponder Sophia's words. A profound sense of doubt washes over Lewis as he looks down and asks himself, what has my whole life been built upon? Wiping away his tears, the little boy looks up at Sophia with a bright, grateful smile and says, "Yeah, thank you." The grateful parents bow deeply in appreciation, and the young boy waves a cheerful goodbye as they head out. Sophia walks back to Lewis, saying, "I'm glad he was found right away. Sorry for making you wait." But seeing his troubled and distant look, she softly asks, "Lewis?" Noticing his uneasy expression and the cold sweat on his face, Sophia asks with growing worry, "Is something wrong?" Averting his gaze to hide his inner turmoil, Duke Lewis mutters, "It's nothing. Let's go," and begins walking past her. Following closely behind him, Sophia casts a worried glance at Lewis as they continue their walk through the crowded exhibition hall. Pointing toward a popular gallery section to break the silence, Sophia asks, "Oh, that exhibit's popular. Can I go check it out later?" To which Lewis quietly replies, "Yeah." Sophia tries to reassure herself, thinking, well, he wasn't much of a talker to begin with. It's not good to worry too much. She reflects on the display, thinking, an exhibition open to all, regardless of age or gender, or so they said. There are all kinds of exhibits. Looking around the grand, sunlit gallery, Sophia notes, it's also a good lesson in what draws whose interest. Duke Lewis remains silent and distant, his sharp gaze fixed ahead as he walks elegantly by her side. Suddenly, a cheerful young blonde boy in a blue vest runs joyfully and excitedly through the exhibition hall. Running without looking where he's going, the young boy collides heavily with Duke Lewis's leg. The sudden impact sends the little boy tumbling backward onto the floor, catching the couple by surprise. Duke Lewis looks down at the boy with an intimidating, stern glare, leaving the frightened child to gasp in fear. "Ah, Terrified by Louis's cold aura, the boy scrambles to his feet and bursts into tears as he runs away, crying, "Mom!" Sophia turns to her husband, starting to say, "Hey, Louis," but is suddenly interrupted by a loud, distressed gasp nearby. They look over to see the young blonde boy standing directly beneath a heavy stone bust that is wobbling dangerously on its high pedestal. The heavy sculpture slips from its stand and plummets directly toward the helpless boy, who freezes in pure terror. Sophia screams out in panic, "Watch out!" But before she can even finish, Duke Louis springs into action with incredible speed. Sophia watches in utter shock and cries out, "Louis?" as her husband lunges forward, throwing his entire body over the child. With a violent crash, the massive stone bust strikes Duke Louis squarely on the back as he acts as a human shield to protect the boy. Gritting his teeth in silent pain, Louis remains hunched over, ensuring the child is kept completely safe and shielded beneath him. The crying child scrambles to his feet and runs off shouting, "Mom, where are you?" while Duke Louis kneels on the floor, holding his injured shoulder in pain. Sophia rushes over, her face pale with shock and deep concern as she checks on her husband's condition. Duke Louis grits his teeth, sweating from the sharp pain in his shoulder as he tries to compose himself. Watching the boys safely run off to find his family, Louis is left to process the profound weight of his sudden protective instinct. Duke Louis kneels in pain on the gallery floor, gritting his teeth after being struck by the falling stone bust, while Sophia looks on in shock. Sophia leans over him in sheer panic, gently placing her hands on his shoulders as she cries out, "Louis!" Sweating and trembling from the agonizing pain in his shoulder, Louis tries to compose himself as Sophia watches in deep worry. As Louis struggles with the intense pain, a dark memory from his traumatic childhood begins to resurface. In a painful flashback, a young Louis collapses onto his hands and knees on the cold stone floor, desperately clutching a heavy wooden training sword. Tears stream down the young boy's face as he gasps in exhaustion. "It hurts! I can't move anymore!" Standing over him with a large sword, his father yells down at him mercilessly, "Stop whining! Get up already!" The young boy remains collapsed on the ground, weeping quietly while his father's towering figure looms over him without a shred of sympathy. His mother stands coldly nearby, reinforcing the pressure as she tells him, "Do as you're told so that your dream of becoming knight captain will come true." Struggling to support himself on his wooden sword, the tearful young boy submissively whispers, "Yes." Looking back with a satisfied but cold expression, his father demands, "That's right, just follow me. I'll make you a man worthy of the Chamberlain name." Trapped in a web of unrelenting expectations, the young boy grips his sword tightly and thinks, "I never wanted it." Standing before his faceless parents, he is constantly told that his suffering is necessary, hearing the words, "It's all for your sake." Bruised and crying, the young Louis tries to comfort himself, whispering, It's all for me. I'm so lucky." Looking back at his childhood from his current perspective, the adult Louis realizes with deep bitterness, it wasn't for my sake at all. Staring coldly at his past, a profound sense of loneliness washes over him as he thinks, "No one cares about me." Louis gasps as he pulls himself back to reality, his eyes snapping open as he whispers, Sophia looks down at him with immense relief, her face softening as she says, "Louis, thank goodness." Crouching beside him on the floor, Sophia worries, "Do you know what happened? Are you in pain?" Before adding, "Right, I wonder if there's an infirmary here." Trying to hide his pain and preserve his dignity, Louis averts his gaze and mutters, "You're overreacting." Standing behind him, Sophia protests, "But you were moaning in pain," to which Louis stubbornly replies, "I was just resting a bit. This is nothing." Sophia looks down at him, her heart aching as she sees his pale face and realizes he is forcing himself to stay strong. Pushing himself up off the gallery floor, Louis insists, "I'm not hurt and I can move already." Walking past her, Louis announces, "I'm going to report on the fallen display item," leaving Sophia to call out in surprise, "Wait, Louis?" The scene transitions to a peaceful golden sunset where the couple sits quietly together on a wooden park bench overlooking a shimmering lake. Sophia looks at Louis as he sits with his arms crossed and his face turned away, thinking, "I managed to get him outside the venue to let him rest, but..." She recalls how she gently coaxed him out of the gallery earlier, suggesting, "How about getting some fresh air outside? Let's rest a little." Looking at her with a quiet, thoughtful expression, Louis had agreed, saying, "If you want to rest." Back in the present, Sophia observes his silent profile and worries, he's been totally spaced out this whole time. Maybe he is hurt somewhere after all. Turning to him, Sophia gently suggests, I know you might not want to make a big deal of it, but I think you should get checked by a doctor. So let's go home and have you checked." Maintaining his defensive, closed-off posture, Louis flatly refuses, saying, No need. Sophia leans in closer, determined not to let him brush off his own well-being. Feeling unworthy of her concern, Louis sighs and says, "No one cares about me anyway. Just forget about it." Sophia's face fills with determination and worry as she says, "At least let me worry about you," catching Louis completely off guard as he gasps. Looking at him with deep sincerity, Sophia continues, "I know you're the knight captain and you're strong, but that doesn't mean—" Surrounded by delicate white blossoms, Sophia gently reminds him, "Besides, you're not on duty right now." Sophia offers him a sweet, warm smile, saying, "Please rest when you're not feeling well." Deeply moved by her unexpected kindness, Louis looks down with a conflicted expression and admits, "I can't rest." Staring out at the sunset, Louis confesses, "I'm not allowed to show weakness." Sophia looks at him with profound sympathy, thinking, "Why go that far?" His profile bathed in the warm sunset light, Louis explains, "No matter what happens, I have to always be the best." He remembers a dark corridor from his childhood, gasping as he pleaded with his father, "Gah, my fever won't go down. Let me rest today." Looking back with a cold, uncaring expression, his father had dismissed his illness, saying, "It's a mere fever. What are you talking about?" Looming over him with a disappointed gaze, his father warned, "Don't disappoint me." Louis reflects on the absolute suppression of his emotions, thinking, becoming knight captain, that was my mission, so I cast aside every soft sentiment I ever had. "I will accept nothing short of the top spot," his father's harsh voice echoes in his memory as the young Louis submissively answered, "Yes." Looking at Sophia, Louis quietly explains, "My sense of normal must be completely different from yours, but I can only act by my own sense of normal." Averting his eyes with a vulnerable look, he sighs, "I suppose that's why I've failed to be more considerate of others. I don't care what people think." Sophia gazes back at him, her eyes filled with profound understanding and deep affection. Smiling warmly, Sophia gently adjusts her hat and says, "I think you're a considerate person." Stunned by her kind words and validation, Louis looks at her in wide-eyed surprise, softly uttering, "Huh." Pointing out his sudden change of heart, Sophia gently reminds him, "What are you talking about? Back at the bazaar, you believed in me and protected me." Looking at him with a tender smile, she adds softly, "It really made me happy." She recalls how, without a single thought for his own safety, Louis had lunged forward to shield a strange child from a falling statue. "You instinctively saved that kid you didn't even know," Sophia says as they sit together on the park bench. "Your body moved before you could think." Staring out over the glistening water at sunset, she concludes warmly, "Deep down, you're kind." Clasping her hands over her heart, Sophia smiles radiantly and thinks, "But I'm sure that those who truly know you can tell what's in your heart." Stunned by her unexpected praise and warmth, Duke Louis freezes in absolute shock, his eyes wide as he looks at her. Blushing and looking away in embarrassment, Louis clears his throat and mutters, "That was a weird thing to say." Sophia giggles and gently replies, "It's not, but please be kind to yourself sometimes. You make me worry." Sitting in a cute, chibi-style pause, Sophia coughs bashfully while Louis looks on in utter confusion, muttering, "What?" Wagging her finger playfully, Sophia smiles and advises, "In times like this, thank you makes me happier." Duke Louis is left speechless, sweating slightly as he processes her advice. Looking away with a faint blush on his face, Louis reluctantly but sincerely murmurs, "Thank you." Sophia looks at him with a deeply content and satisfied smile, happy to see him open up. Their quiet moment is interrupted when a woman in green accompanied by the young blonde boy approaches their bench. Standing politely before them with her son peeking from behind her, the grateful mother says, "Thank you so much." Bowing deeply to the couple, she explains, "We talked to the staff. We were looking for you." The mother gently coaxes her shy son forward, whispering, "Come on, don't be shy. You wanted to thank the kind big brother, right?" Stepping forward with wide, sparkling eyes, the young boy looks up at Duke Louis and says, "Thanks for saving me." Duke Louis looks down at the boy with a calm, gentle expression, instructing him, "Be more careful around people from now on." The mother and child wave goodbye happily as they depart, calling out, "Thank you so much." Sophia stands up to wave them off with a bright smile, while Louis watches them go from his seat on the bench. Turning back to her husband, Sophia gives him a knowing look and says, "See?" Bathed in the gorgeous sunset light, Sophia stands gracefully by the lake, looking back at him like a vision. A peaceful smile finally touches Louis's face as he responds softly, "Yeah." After a peaceful transition, the scene shifts to the grand mansion where Sophia stands before a heavy set of double doors, knocking gently. Holding a stack of papers in her hand, she calls out, "It's Sophia. Do you have a moment?" Suddenly, a loud, heavy thud echoes from inside the room, startling Sophia. Confused and worried, Sophia stands outside as she hears frantic rustling and scuffling sounds coming from within the study. Door flies open to reveal Louis looking slightly disheveled and flustered, gasping, "I didn't expect a visit from you." Sophia smiles apologetically and explains, "Sorry for coming so early in the morning. I heard you'd be out in the evening." She holds up a thick stack of papers and letters that she brought with her. Duke Louis stares at the documents with a surprised and slightly overwhelmed expression. Sophia hands the papers to him and he nods, saying, "Kate will be pleased. I'll hand them over." Sophia replies warmly, "Please do." Looking at him with deep concern, Sophia asks, "And are you feeling all right after what happened? You did see a doctor, didn't you?" Wanting to ease her worries, Louis replies, "Just as you said, I saw one, so don't worry." Sophia's face lights up with a cheerful laugh, saying, "I'm glad you're okay." Duke Louis gazes at her softly and inquires, "How about you? Are you all right?" To which Sophia responds in surprise, "Me?" Sophia blinks in astonishment, deeply touched that he is asking about her well-being. Clasping her hands gently, Sophia realizes with a warm heart he was worried about me, as she reflects on how her morning sickness has finally subsided. Standing in the sunlit doorway, Sophia reassures him the doctor also said there were no problems. Looking at her with quiet sincerity, Louis murmurs, "If anything happens." Sophia looks up at him with a soft, grateful smile and says, "Yes, thank you." From outside the window, the couple can be seen sharing a quiet, intimate conversation in the privacy of the study. Later, Sophia sits alone at her writing desk, staring down thoughtfully as she thinks, maybe Louis has been overextending himself all this time. Pausing her embroidery work, she looks down with a melancholic expression, deeply concerned for her husband's hidden burdens. Sophia reflects on Duke Louis's past, thinking what bound Louis was surely his parents, as an image of his cold, stern parents looms amidst dark, thorny roses. She remembers the intense pressure she felt meeting them, realizing that ever since Louis was born, he was demanded to be absolutely perfect, submissively answering his father's harsh expectations with, "Yes, father." Recalling their past discussions, Sophia remembers telling Louis, "I think it's best to refrain for a while," to which he had quietly agreed, "I understand." Staring out into the distance, Sophia is left with a lingering question in her heart. I wonder why did he listen to my request to stop trying for a child? Doing some embroidery at her desk, Sophia reflects on her husband's gentle nature, thinking, come to think of it, he never forced me to do anything. Looking at her crafting materials and books, Sophia wonders if his past actions were misunderstood, thinking, I was only ever concerned about his indifference. Maybe it was his own way of being considerate toward me. She recalls their union, realizing how their circumstances shaped their relationship. Since I married him for political reasons, smiling softly as she sews, Sophia thinks to herself, perhaps he's been mindful of my feelings all along, and she suddenly gasps in shock as she remembers his firm, cold words echoing in her mind. I don't want children. Staring down at her desk in a quiet room, she rationalizes his past behavior. No, he probably only agreed because he doesn't want kids. Clasping her embroidery hoop tightly, she feels conflicted. I don't know the true intentions behind his actions, but I actually heard those words. Sophia places her hand over her stomach, determined to make a difficult choice for the future. To protect this child, I have to leave this house.
Suddenly, a sharp realization hits her, sending a jolt of anxiety through her body.
Sophia's train of thought is interrupted when her maid enters with a tray, saying, yes, that's right. The maid's cute chibi form explains, it looks like you'll finish the book in the next session, so things are going smoothly. Reaching for a heavy book on the desk, Sophia says, I'm so relieved that the study sessions are helping me stay on schedule, but I have to review everything. Sophia and her maid smile warmly as they imagine the young Elliot proudly showing off a perfect score on his test. Sophia looks at her maid with a thoughtful, serious expression, starting to say, maid looks back with wide, surprised eyes, clutching her silver serving tray tightly to her chest. Resting her hand on the desk, Sophia continues, I need to consult with him about the environment for doing business too. And since I can't just suddenly vanish, looking up at her maid, Sophia explains, I thought it would be better to explain the situation. Surrounded by bright, cheerful daisies, the maid smiles and reassures her, I'm sure he'll be a great help. Sophia smiles back softly, comforted by her maid's unwavering support and encouragement. Reading a book, Sophia turns the page as she reflects on the passage of time. 5 months goes by surprisingly fast. Sophia lowers the book slightly, a sad and worried expression crossing her face as she ponders the future. Outside, a beautiful crescent moon shines brightly in the dark night sky, surrounded by whispering trees. Deep within the forest, a quiet military camp is set up for the night with a warm campfire burning in the center of the tents. Sitting on a bench by the fire, the blonde knight sighs and says, "It's been a while since we went on a subjugation, but that was easy, as expected of the knight commander. Those thieves just weren't much to look at." He groans, adding, "Returning at sunrise just to face a mountain of paperwork." When Duke Louis suddenly stands up, the blonde knight looks up in confusion, wondering, "Speaking of paperwork," holding a neat stack of documents, Duke Louis looks back and explains Sophia included hers as well. The blonde knight happily takes the documents, asking, "Did she put this all together? Let me see." He holds up the beautifully organized and ribbon-bound stack of papers. Deeply impressed by the neatness, the blonde knight marvels, "I can't believe she did such a thorough job. Sophia." Gazing quietly into the flames, Duke Louis remarks, "I couldn't exactly be the only one not taking it seriously." The blonde knight looks at him with wide-eyed shock, whispering, "No way." Leaning in with an eager grin, the blonde knight asks, "So, how was it, the two of you going out together?" A close-up shows Duke Louis looking down, a quiet and reflective expression in his eyes. Staring out into the night, Duke Louis admits, "For the first time, it was a boring story," but clasping his gloved hands together, he continues, "I talked about myself. She listened earnestly." He recalls Sophia's radiant smile as she stood gracefully under the sunset, thinking, "And so?" Surrounded by the warmth of the fire and glowing sparkles, Louis confesses, "I felt as if some part of me had been redeemed." Moved by the commander's vulnerability, the blonde knight gives a soft, gentle smile and mutters, "Heh." Duke Louis continues, "But I was surprised by how strong she actually is. She used to be unstable and her health was poor." Looking away with a hint of concern, Louis murmurs, "Well, I can't feel at ease. She always tells others not to overdo it, yet she also—" Watching his commander, the blonde knight smiles warmly to himself, thinking, "It seems that Louis finally has someone important to him." Resting his chin in his hand, Duke Louis murmurs, "So I think it'll be fine, but—" Floating chibi puppies appear around Duke Louis as he turns to his silent companion, asking, "Hey, are you listening?" The blonde knight quickly snaps out of it and replies cheerfully, "Of course. If your wife is in good health, that's better than anything." Giving a playful wink and pointing his finger, the blonde knight suggests, "That means you can even go on a date." Duke Louis is caught completely off guard, sweating slightly in surprise at his friend's enthusiastic suggestion. A gorgeous purple and white evening gown with matching shoes is displayed on a decorated pink background as the blonde knight says, "There's an evening party coming up soon, so it's perfect." Leaning in closer, the blonde knight teases, "Picking a dress together? You want to make your wife happy, right?" As Louis blushes and sweats nervously. In his mind, Louis imagines Sophia wearing the beautiful gown, looking absolutely breathtaking with a sweet, happy smile. Blushing furiously at his own thoughts, Duke Louis looks away in sheer embarrassment, clearing his throat. Sophia and Elliot sit quietly at a round table, focused on their study materials in a peaceful, sunlit room. Elliot gently shuts his notebook with a soft thud, signaling the end of their study session. Elliot smiles warmly at Sophia and says, "Now that we've wrapped that up, shall we take a little break?" Sophia smiles softly and replies, "Yes, I'd love to." A plate of beautifully decorated, jam-filled cookies sparkles invitingly on the tea table. Sophia happily enjoys a cookie, thinking, "Sweet things really hit the spot," while Elliot observes with a smile, thinking, "Sugar intake is important after all." Elliot sips his tea and gently inquires, "So, how have things been lately? I mean, things at home?" As Sophia looks up at him with a slightly startled expression. Looking concerned, Elliot explains, "I knew it. I've been worried ever since I visited your house." Sophia smiles softly as she cups her hot tea, murmuring, "Even if I try to hide it, you always see right through me, Elliot." Elliot looks at her with deep sympathy and asks, "You've always been the type to constantly worry about others, Sophia. Are you pushing yourself too hard at home?" Looking down thoughtfully at her teacup, Sophia sighs, "I suppose. Perhaps I was pushing myself before." Sophia looks away and continues, "Like I mentioned, Louis is a man of few words, so I never knew what he was thinking." Elliot listens quietly as Sophia pauses, murmuring, "But you know." Sophia smiles warmly, reflecting on her husband's subtle consideration. "I've started to feel that he's looking out for me in his own way." Feeling relieved, Elliot smiles gently and responds, "I see. That's good." Sophia's expression becomes serious and quiet as she hesitates, starting, "Actually," framed by dark blue roses, Sophia reveals her heavy resolve, announcing, "I'm thinking of leaving that house." Stunned by her sudden confession, Elliot looks at her in complete shock and exclaims, "What? Leaving the house? Why?" Elliot sits frozen in surprise, unable to fully process Sophia's unexpected decision. Millie stands behind them with a solemn expression as Elliot stares at Sophia in speechless bewilderment. Elliot looks at Sophia with deep concern and asks, "Something happened, didn't it?" To which she looks down and replies, "The truth is." Elliot repeats in disbelief, "So you're leaving the house to protect the child in your womb?" Elliot clenches his gloved hands, feeling deeply conflicted as he wonders, but why would he say he doesn't want a child? Sophia looks up with a sad but understanding expression, murmuring, "He must have his own reasons." Placing her hands flat on the table, Sophia hesitates, saying, "But..." Sophia looks at Elliot with unwavering determination in her tearful eyes, stating, "I want to protect this child no matter what." Elliot is deeply moved and saddened by Sophia's quiet strength and motherly resolve. Elliot clenches his gloved hands tightly, feeling a wave of intense frustration and concern for her situation. Elliot leans forward and inquires, "Then he hasn't realized you're pregnant yet?" To which Sophia softly replies, "No, the only ones who know are Millie and the doctor." Looking down guiltily, Sophia apologizes. "I'm sorry for keeping it from you for so long, Elliot. I knew it would involve you, and I hesitated over whether to tell you or not." Looking at her notebook on the table, Sophia explains her reasoning. "But when I think about my life after leaving the house, I wanted to be able to consult with you in the future." Looking up at Elliot with earnest hope, Sophia asks, "Would you be willing to lend me your strength?" With a warm, sincere gaze, Elliot gently replies, "I told you before, didn't I?" Elliot smiles brightly and reassures her, "No matter what, I am always on your side, Sophia." Deeply touched by his unwavering loyalty, Sophia smiles warmly through her worries and says, "Thank you." Elliot sits back and explains, "I'm worried, of course, but because it's you, I know you've thought this through seriously before deciding." Elliot looks down at the business book on the table, realizing, "So that's why you were interested in business." Sophia explains, "I'll need a stable income to raise a child on my own, but I'll need buyers too." Sophia looks down with a slightly anxious expression, wondering, "It won't be easy, will it?" Elliot immediately reassures her, saying, "Not at all. Your pieces did really well at the bazaar, so the demand is definitely there." Elliot points his finger up confidently and smiles, adding, "If you'll let me handle the marketing, I've already got a few places in mind to sell them." Overwhelmed with gratitude, Sophia smiles softly and murmurs, "I'm always being saved by you, Elliot." The cozy study room is filled with a warm, gentle atmosphere as the three friends share a moment of solidarity. Elliot looks at Sophia with a tender, supportive smile, happy to be someone she can rely on. Outside, the sunset fades into twilight as the scene shifts back to Sophia's private chambers, where Millie's organizing books on the desk. Millie smiles warmly and says, "I'm so glad you were able to talk to Lord Elliot," to which Sophia sits comfortably on the couch and responds, "Yes." Sophia reflects on her decision with a peaceful smile, thinking, "I hesitated over whether I should tell him." As Millie tidies up, Sophia thinks with a grateful heart, having Millie and Elliot? Millie approaches Sophia holding a sealed red envelope and says, "This is from Lady Brenda." Sophia takes the letter and gasps in surprise as she opens it, eager to read its contents. "As a thank you for teaching me embroidery, let's have tea at my place. I would be delighted if we could have a nice long chat." Sophia reads Brenda's invitation with a soft, pleased smile. "That's right, Brenda too," Sophia murmurs quietly to herself as she holds the letter close. Sophia says to Millie, "I'm sure she would be worried if I suddenly left the house." Millie touches her chest with a sympathetic expression and replies, "That's true. I think she'd be very sad as well." "I want to explain the situation to her properly," Sophia decides thoughtfully. Sophia holds up the letter, declaring, "She's a precious friend." Millie claps her hands together happily and smiles as she looks at Sophia. Sophia sits at her desk and says, "Please do," as Millie hands her the letter. Millie walks out of the study, leaving Sophia alone with her thoughts. On Sophia's desk lies a pair of elegant white gloves and an embroidery hoop with a green stitched L. Holding the hoop in her hands, Sophia thinks, "Even though I intend to leave the house soon, I wonder if I shouldn't give this to him." Sophia looks at the half-finished embroidery, thinking, "I want to thank him for helping me at the bazaar if I can." Sophia gently handles the needle and thread, continuing her delicate embroidery work. Under a dark blue twilight sky with a crescent moon, Elliot's mansion stands quietly. Elliot stands in his library retrieving a book while thinking, "I was surprised to hear Sophia was pregnant." Looking solemn, Elliot pauses, thinking, "But I never imagined she intended to leave." Elliot gazes at his desk, realizing she probably intends to raise the child all by herself. He recalls Sophia sitting at the tea table with a sorrowful look, thinking, leaving home to live as a commoner. Elliot places a book on the shelf, reflecting, "I'm happy she relied on me, but is helping with business enough?" Elliot walks through his quiet library at night, filled with worry for Sophia's future. Elliot recalls Sophia's sweet, gentle smile and thinks, no, that look on her face, she might still be feeling conflicted. Clutching his shirt, Elliot feels a sudden throb of heartache, thinking she looked genuinely happy. He turns away and tries to convince himself, I'm just worried about her as a childhood friend. In his mind, the gentle image of Sophia smiling remains clear. Elliot holds his head in distress, deeply conflicted about his true feelings. The next morning, Sophia opens the door with a soft click, dressed beautifully in her outdoor attire. Sophia enters the room to find Duke Lewis standing there in his formal commander's uniform. Lewis looks over in surprise and says, "Good morning," to which Sophia replies, "Ah." Sophia stands elegantly in a beautiful blue dress, lace gloves, and a wide-brimmed hat, looking slightly puzzled. Duke Lewis looks down at the hem of her dress, realizing she seems to be heading out. Lewis thinks to himself, well, I'll just get the report from the guards later. In a humorous flashback, Lewis sternly tells his sweating subordinate, from now on, unnecessary reports are unneeded. Staring at Sophia, Lewis reflects, that's right, I stopped asking, ever since that incident with his childhood friend. Turning to Sophia, Lewis asks, are you going somewhere? To which she responds in surprise, huh. Chibi Sophia winks playfully and giggles, saying, it's just that you've never asked about my schedule before. Smiling warmly, Sophia explains, I've been invited to Brenda's house, so I'm going there. Lewis looks down slightly and replies, I see. Duke Lewis remains silent, clutching his uniform jacket as he watches her. Sophia smiles and turns to leave, her heels clicking softly on the floor. Looking after her, Duke Lewis quietly whispers, yeah. Brenda's grand mansion stands beautifully under the clear morning sky. A delicious high tea spread with fresh cakes, pastries, and tea is beautifully arranged. Sitting in the sunny conservatory, Brenda smiles brightly and says, I'm so happy we could have a nice long talk like this.
Sophia sips her tea and replies warmly, me too. Thank you for inviting me.
Brenda beams with joy, saying, I was hesitant about the timing because of your health, but I heard you've been feeling better lately. I'm glad. Looking slightly nervous, Sophia hesitates, murmuring, well, about that, actually? The speech bubble reveals Sophia's quiet confession. It was morning sickness. Brenda sits frozen in complete shock as Sophia's words sink in, whispering, morning sickness? Yes, I'm pregnant. Oh my! Congratulations! Thank you. I'm sorry for keeping it a secret, even though you were worried. Don't worry about it. I'm sure you have your reasons, right? May I ask why? Thank you. It's so that Lewis doesn't find out. Brenda stares at Sophia in absolute shock and concern as the weight of her friend's secret sinks in. My in-laws have wanted a child for a long time, and I thought Lewis felt the same way. I was truly happy the day I found out I was pregnant, but Lewis said, I don't want children. I happened to overhear him saying that. That's terrible. But you can't keep it a secret forever, can you? That's why I plan to leave the house before he finds out. Leave the house? Brenda looks down, completely speechless and sweating slightly in disbelief at Sophia's drastic decision. I know your relationship wasn't very good in the past, but things have been changing lately, haven't they? Nevertheless, you still can't talk to him? To be honest, I do have some doubts. At first, I didn't understand him at all. I was anxious about what would happen if he found out, so I decided to hide it. If he doesn't want children, he might never love the child. Sophia looks away with a sorrowful expression, her heart heavy with conflict over her husband's feelings. I might even have the child taken away from me by my in-laws, who I'm always subservient to. Because the anxiety won't go away, I can't give birth to this child in a house where I don't know how we'll be treated. However, if Lewis actually wanted a child, well, I do find myself thinking things like that sometimes. Looking at Sophia, Brenda is surprised by how serious and thoughtful she has become. But doing it for her child? That's so like her. Then I'm sure it's for her and her child's happiness. It would be best if Lord Chamberlain stayed by her side, but either way, I will support Sophia. Thank you for telling me. When have you decided to leave? Well, it's planned for the day of Lewis's next long-term expedition. I see. I hope you can find out his true feelings by then. Directly asking him isn't really an option. It would be tricky. That's right. There's no point if he catches on or lies to me. I'll try to think it through so I don't leave any lingering doubts. Will you be okay with your life after leaving the house? Elliot is also helping me. I haven't decided on a place to live yet, though. Please let me help, too. Both friends look at each other with comedic expressions of nervous sweat and determination during the dramatic tea party. I want to be of help, too. Brenda. Then leave it to me. Yes. Thank you, Brenda. It was a wonderful time being able to talk like that with Brenda.
By talking about it, I was able to organize the doubts within myself.
In order not to worry everyone who is helping me, I have to make a final judgment by the time the plan is set to happen. Opening the door to her residence, Sophia freezes in shock as she sees Duke Lewis standing at the far end of the hallway watching her. "Lewis, why are you at the entrance? I wonder if something happened. I was waiting for you." Looking to resolve their persistent miscommunication and find a mutually beneficial path forward, Duke Lewis confronts Sophia directly, stating, "We need to talk." To cultivate a stronger relational bond and maximize their shared utility, Duke Lewis gently holds Sophia's hand as they embark on a joint outing into the city. Guided by the desire to satisfy Sophia's practical needs and elevate her comfort, Lewis points out the boutique, saying, "It's the shop." Sophia responds with cautious optimism, hoping this collaborative effort will bring them closer to a harmonious resolution, murmuring, "I see." Sophia privately worries about the potential disruption to their household stability, thinking, "I thought he'd found out about my pregnancy back then," but re-emphasizing the high priority of clear, open dialogue to avoid unnecessary suffering, Lewis repeats firmly, "We need to talk." Recognizing the importance of cooperative engagement for their mutual long-term welfare, Sophia cautiously replies, "Yes?" Both characters feel the emotional weight of their previous alienation, as Sophia asks, "What is it?" seeking to clarify his intentions. Recognizing the social expectations that affect their public standing and overall social utility, Lewis explains, "There's an evening party coming up soon." Desiring to bring Sophia joy and improve their relationship's harmony, Lewis proposes a joint activity. "So, would you like to go to the city to buy a dress?" Accompanying him closely, Sophia reflects on how clear communication minimizes distress, thinking, he didn't have to look so serious about it. Sophia finds comfort and happiness in his earnest effort to please her, smiling as she thinks, he's such a clumsy man. Noticing her subtle shift in mood, Lewis seeks to understand her needs better, asking, "What is it?" Sophia chooses to focus on immediate positive experiences, maximizing their current happiness by smiling and replying, "It's nothing, let's go inside." They step into an exceptionally well-designed boutique where the beautiful layout and fine selections are optimized to offer the highest aesthetic satisfaction. To facilitate a smooth and efficient shopping experience, the skilled store staff assist the couple as they evaluate the available choices. Lewis reflects on how to optimize this date to ensure Sophia's complete satisfaction, wondering if actively helping her select items would yield the best emotional outcome. He recalls his past habit of outsourcing purchasing decisions to merchants, realizing that passive consumption does not foster genuine interpersonal connection. Wanting to make the most beneficial choice but lacking knowledge of her preferences, he laments, "There's no way I'd understand what Sophia likes." Remembering advice on how to foster happiness, he recalls a friend reminding him, "You want to make her happy, right?" Sophia inspects a dress on a mannequin, evaluating how its design and material might optimize her physical comfort and style. Seeing her look at the dress, Lewis observes her reactions closely, attempting to gather the data needed to understand her tastes. He takes note of her visual preferences to ensure future decisions bring her maximum joy, thinking, "So she likes this kind of thing." Promoting a balanced and equal distribution of benefits, Sophia asks, "Lewis, didn't you come to look at things for yourself too?" To which he replies, "Don't worry about me." Sensing his intense focus on her satisfaction rather than his own, Sophia looks puzzled and asks, "What's wrong?" In a humorous mental image, Sophia fondly imagines her husband as a highly attentive, twitchy-eared kitten whose sole focus is tracking her choices to ensure her happiness. Encouraging him to pursue his own well-being alongside hers, Sophia warmly suggests, "Don't mind me. Maybe you should find something you like too, Lewis." Recognizing the mutual benefit of her suggestion, Lewis accedes to her request, replying, "If you say so." Lewis walks over to the men's formal wear section, aiming to select attire that aligns with their goal of a harmonious appearance. His eyes are drawn to a beautiful gown, instinctively recognizing that its superb design would highlight Sophia's elegance and maximize her pleasure. The store clerk approaches with a helpful suggestion to increase their cohesive presentation, saying, "We also have men's attire available so that you can wear a matching set." Lewis considers the profound social and emotional value of unity, reflecting on the clerk's suggestion, a matching set. He realizes that coordinated appearances visually signal partnership and mutual support, which increases social harmony and reduces uncomfortable gossip. Excited to facilitate this positive outcome for the couple, the clerk politely says, "I will prepare them for you." Approaching Sophia with a practical proposal to enhance their upcoming social experience, Lewis says, "Sophia, I have a suggestion." And she replies, "Yes?" Sophia turns to give him her full attention, open to ideas that could bring greater cohesion and mutual satisfaction to their relationship. Louis admits his growing awareness of how their shared representation affects their peace of mind, saying, "I've never paid much attention to it before, but I thought it might look more cohesive that way." He remembers how their mismatched attire in the past invited negative comments, creating a painful social friction that lowered their collective well-being. Deeply touched by his voluntary effort to create harmony and spare them future discomfort, Sophia smiles, thinking, to think Louis would be the one to suggest it. Eager to reinforce his positive behavior and build their shared happiness, Sophia enthusiastically agrees, yes, let's do that. The couple stands together in the boutique, ready to choose matching designs that symbolize their progress toward a more unified and supportive partnership. Looking over the elegant selections, they both benefit from the renewed warmth and mutual understanding growing between them. Sophia identifies an exquisite green gown with matching gold accents, noting the elegant color and brilliance seem perfect for an evening party. To ensure they achieve the best possible aesthetic outcome, Sophia smiles and suggests, "They're all so lovely, I'm having trouble deciding. Maybe we should go with these." Confirming that they have successfully resolved the decision-making process to her satisfaction, Louis replies, "So the one for the evening party is decided." Concerned with avoiding wasteful expenditure and maximizing resource efficiency, Sophia responds, "Huh? Just the necessities are enough." Sophia reflects on the importance of moderate consumption to avoid regret, thinking, "It'll be a waste." Suggesting a highly practical and step-by-step approach to their needs, Sophia adds, "But if I need anything else, we can just come back and get it whenever I need to." Recognizing the rationality and wisdom of her resource-saving approach, Louis looks at her gently and murmurs, then, agreeing to the most sensible and utility-maximizing path that keeps them both content, Louis smiles softly and says, "All right." Sophia expresses her gratitude, saying, "Thank you for today," to which Louis warmly replies, "Yeah, if there's anything you need, let's go again." Sophia looks up with a soft, gentle smile, feeling a warm sense of happiness after their outing together. Reaching into her handbag, Sophia searches for something as she murmurs, Looking at Louis with deep sincerity, Sophia says, "I truly appreciate everything you did for me." With a gentle gesture, Sophia presents a small, beautifully wrapped gift box to a surprised Louis. Duke Louis stares down in silent amazement at the unexpected present in his hands. Feeling a sudden wave of nervousness, Sophia watches him anxiously, wondering how he will react to her token of appreciation. Mistaking his silent shock for disapproval, Sophia casts her gaze downward and says, "I guess you don't want it." A soft blue floral background frames his immediate reassurance. That's not true. Louis reaches out and gently places his gloved hand over hers as they hold the gift together, silently comforting her. Caught off guard by his sudden warmth, Sophia murmurs in surprise, "Huh?" Looking at her with a quiet, serious gaze, Louis confesses, "As I thought." Reflecting on their past cold interactions, Louis's heart aches with regret as he thinks, "I had hurt her feelings." Gazing down at the gift, Louis speaks with heartfelt sincerity, saying, "I'm sorry about that time." Sophia freezes in shock, her eyes widening as she hears her husband offer a genuine apology for the past. Looking at her sheepishly, Louis wonders, or maybe, in times like this, should I be saying thank you instead? Surrounded by soft, glowing roses, Duke Louis holds the gift box close to his chest, his expression filled with rare vulnerability. Sophia's purple eyes sparkle with overwhelming joy and relief at his earnest words. Smiling brightly, Sophia looks at him with pure affection and replies, "You're welcome." Fiery, red-haired woman stands with an intense, angry expression as sparks of energy surround her, marking a dramatic transition. The title card appears against a beautiful pastel twilight sky, reading "Pregnant and gone in 5 months." The maid gasps in admiration as Sophia finishes preparing in her room, exclaiming, "You look stunning, Lady Sophia." Looking around the luxurious dressing room, the maid adds excitedly, "I can't wait for everyone to see you." Opening the door with a bright smile, the maid says, "Allow me to see you to the door." The maid suddenly freezes in place, her eyes widening in absolute shock at the person waiting outside. Duke Louis stands tall in his magnificent evening attire, adjusting his pristine white gloves with an air of aristocratic elegance. Flustered and amazed, the maid bows deeply and stammers, "Lord, please excuse me." Sophia is revealed in her breathtaking evening gown, adorned with a luxurious white fur stole and exquisite jewelry. Stepping back, the maid thinks to herself in astonishment, I was surprised. She watches them in awe, thinking, "I never imagined the Lord would come to pick Lady Sophia up himself." Louis gazes intently at Sophia, completely captivated by her stunning appearance. Feeling a bit self-conscious under her radiant beauty, Louis blushes slightly and says, "You seem like a different person." Sophia blushes in return, looking up at him in surprise as she murmurs, "Eh?" The maid is absolutely flabbergasted, screaming internally, Did the Lord just give her a compliment?" Recovering her composure, Sophia smiles warmly and replies, "Thank you. You look wonderful too, Louis. It's quite a refreshing change." Sophia's eyes light up as she notices a familiar detail on his outfit, whispering, "Oh, that." Tucked neatly inside Duke Louis's pocket is the elegant green handkerchief Sophia had previously gifted him. Noticing her gaze, Louis gently touches his pocket and says, "Yes, it's the one you gave me. I have the handkerchief with me too." With a subtle, proud smile, he adds, "It went well with this outfit." Overjoyed by his thoughtful gesture, Sophia beams with happiness and says, "It suits you very well." Louis looks at her with deep affection, his gaze softer and warmer than ever before. Offering his hand, Louis says, "Let us go then," as they prepare to take their leave. The couple walks side by side down the grand hall, their elegant matching attire perfectly synchronized. Watching them walk away, the maid reflects on their past distance, noting, "The air between them is different than it was back then." A warm smile graces the maid's face as she thinks, "It's almost as if they are a happily married couple." A soft, glowing pink background sparkles with magical light, reflecting the growing warmth in their hearts. The maid clasps her hands together, silently praying for the couple's continued happiness and reconciliation. The grand banquet hall of the Imperial Palace is bathed in golden light, sparkling with majestic chandeliers as guests gather for the evening party. Conversation ceases and heads turn in astonishment as the guests catch sight of the arriving Duke and Duchess. Looking absolutely radiant and unified, Duke Louis and Lady Sophia descend the grand staircase arm in arm, drawing every eye in the room. Three noble women at the party whisper in astonishment, noting their outfits, they came in matching colors today. From across the ballroom, guests turn their heads and whisper as they watch Duke Louis and Lady Sophia walk by in their perfectly coordinated ensembles. Walking arm in arm, Sophia looks up at her husband with a warm, gentle smile, while Louis maintains his dignified, aristocratic posture. Surprised by the sudden display of unity, one of the noble women murmurs, "I wonder if something happened." As they reach the bottom of the grand staircase, the low murmur of the crowd follows them, drawing the attention of everyone in the banquet hall. Despite his elegant appearance, Duke Louis feels a wave of self-consciousness, a light sweat breaking out on his face under the intense gazes of the crowd. Noticing his tension, Sophia giggles softly and teases, "You look rather uncomfortable. You haven't participated much in these events before, Louis." Louis looks away slightly, thoughtfully placing his gloved hand to his chin as he reflects on her observation. Framed by soft blue flowers, Louis gazes ahead and confesses his vulnerability, thinking, "I can't help but feel restless." Sophia's eyes widen in surprise at his rare admission of vulnerability, caught off guard by his honesty. Feeling a bit flustered, Sophia lets out a nervous chuckle while Louis looks at her with a questioning gaze. Stepping toward the refreshment table, Sophia gently suggests, "I'm a bit thirsty, so I'll go get something to drink." Instinctively protective, Louis turns to accompany her and declares, "I'm coming too." Surprised by his eager response, Sophia blinks in mild amusement and replies, "Oh, all right." As they stand by the refreshment table, the surrounding guests maintain their distance, casting curious glances and whispering among themselves. An intimidating aura radiates from Duke Louis as he crosses his arms, causing the surrounding nobles to nervously avoid their vicinity. Taking a sip of her drink, Sophia notes the empty space around them and thinks, "I feel like everyone is avoiding us." Walking through the spacious hall, Sophia realizes that the other attendees are actively keeping their distance from them. Sophia is startled when two passing gentlemen suddenly tense up and turn away in a panic. Sensing a potential threat, Louis steps in close and wraps his arm protectively around Sophia, casting a chilling glare at the passing nobles. Trembling under the Duke's intense pressure, one of the noblemen quickly stammers, sorry." Louis continues to glare fiercely at the departing nobles, warning them with his sharp blue eyes. The group of noblemen flinches and trembles in absolute terror under the Duke's menacing aura. Bowing deeply in unison, they frantically apologize, crying out, "I am terribly sorry." Surprised by the sudden scene, Sophia looks up at Louis with wide eyes as he slightly relaxes his posture. Sophia looks thoughtful and speaks softly, realizing the source of the social friction. "Yes." Turning to her husband, Sophia prepares to address the situation gently so as not to hurt his feelings. Sophia gently points out the impact of his intense protective aura, saying, "But it's bothering those around us." Blushing slightly with embarrassment, Louis clears his throat into his gloved hand and concedes, "I suppose you're right." Sophia beams with a soft, affectionate smile as she watches her husband try to hide his embarrassment. Nearby, a beautiful red-haired woman chats with another noblewoman near the banquet spread. Sophia suggests they mingle separately, saying, "You must have greetings to make as well, Louis. Let's separate for a little while." To which he quickly tries to object. "I'll come." Sophia's gentle warning echoes in his mind, reminding him of how his constant presence might overwhelm the other guests. Remembering her words, Louis looks down with a defeated expression, silently accepting her suggestion. With a quiet sigh, Louis steps back and allows Sophia to move freely on her own. Sophia walks gracefully across the hall to greet the red-haired noblewoman she spotted earlier. The red-haired woman turns around, her eyes widening in pleasant surprise upon seeing Sophia. Sophia glances back with a puzzled expression, noticing that Louis is still standing nearby, arms crossed, staring intently in her direction. Smiling warmly, the red-haired woman chuckles and points out, "He's been watching over you this whole time, Sophia." Sophia lets out a gentle sigh, murmuring with a helpless smile, "Louis is being far too overprotective today." She remembers her past loneliness, thinking, "Even though he should know that I've been attending social gatherings alone until now because of a certain someone." The red-haired lady smiles knowingly and teases, "I wonder." Eager to teasingly confront him, the red-haired woman takes Sophia's hand and says, "I'd like to greet him too, so let's go," leaving Sophia to stammer, "Really?" They walk back to Louis, and the red-haired woman greets him with a lively, confident smile while he remains stoic. Bringing up the matching attire, the red-haired lady cheerfully remarks, "Come to think of it, I heard you chose the dress together." Listening in on their conversation, nearby noblewomen whisper in shock, "Together? So the rumors were right." Looking at the whispering crowd, the red-haired woman thinks determinedly, "I have to change the way people perceive them." She addresses Louis directly, saying, "It's wonderful to see how much you treasure your wife," leaving him thoroughly flustered as he stammers, "Is that so?" Blushing deeply, Sophia waves her hands in embarrassment and tries to play it down, saying, "Brenda, you're exaggerating." Suddenly, a lovely noblewoman with brown hair and bright green eyes approaches them with a warm, polite smile, greeting, "Good evening," as the group turns to reply, "Oh, good evening." Duke Louis looks on as Brenda, holding a wine glass, begins to address him with a warm, knowing smile. Brenda continues speaking to Duke Louis, politely pointing out, "This is a place for socializing, while your feelings of concern for her are very lovely." Against a lovely pink rose background, Brenda smiles and advises, "I would not recommend interfering too much for Sophia's sake." Turning to him, Brenda gracefully sips her drink and adds, "This may be meddling, but..." Brenda and Duke Louis continue their conversation in the grand ballroom, with Louis looking thoughtful as he takes her advice to heart. Inside the carriage on their way home, Louis observes, "You have a good friend," and Sophia happily replies, "Yes, I'm very blessed." A gentle smile graces Sophia's face as she warmly reflects, "This is the first time I've ever enjoyed the social season this much." Framed by lovely blue flowers, Louis crosses his arms and tentatively suggests, "From now on, why don't we have dinner together?" Surprised by his sudden request, Sophia tilts her head in curiosity and asks, "I don't mind, but why?" Blushing slightly, Louis touches his chin with his gloved hand and softly explains, "As a husband and wife, I feel that we should spend more time together." Deeply touched by his sincere words, Sophia looks at him with a warm, affectionate smile and murmurs, "I see." Gazing out the carriage window, Louis rests his hand near his collar and wears a quiet, gentle smile, feeling a deep sense of peace and happiness.